Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Worm, a Daily Planet Films podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss the hit web serial Worm week by week, arc by arc. I am your host, Matt Freeman, and my path to victory has led me to create this podcast. And this is my horrible creations, the Scott in a Ball. Scott.
I am in control of my mind and my feelings, and I am focused. I am confident, and I am building towards a better future for myself. Every success is a component in building that up. A brick on a building in construction. But my mistakes do not tear it down. They are part of me, but they are not the most important part of me. And this is the podcast for you, a worm expert guide me, a first-time reader through Wild Bill's world of superheroes, supervillains, and everything in between as I inspect, interpret, and even speculate on what the story is and where it is going. Matt, this week we talk about Worms, the end of Worm's penultimate arc, Arc 29, chapters 29.6 through 29. Fortuna.
Yeah.
This is it, Matt. This is it. We're like, these are the last steps we need to take until we get to our climax. We're rising the shit out of that action, and we're here. We're here at the last moments before we get into our final battle.
Yep. Everything is very nicely lined up in terms of a whole bunch of characters, a whole bunch of thematic threads. It's I don't know. I have a good feeling about this, Scott. I feel like it's going to go well.
Yeah, nothing's going to go wrong. But of course, we know, you and I know with story structure, the moment that leads to the climax is the main character, the protagonist, having to make one final choice, to make one final decision to really seal the person they're going to be at the end of this thing. And that's what we get here. This arc ends on Taylor's last choice, if you will, before we get into this climax, and we're going to talk all about this, but it kind of perfectly encapsulates everything that all 1.5 million words have been leading to.
Yeah, and it's perfect that we're contrasted with the interlude character that we were contrasted with, that being Contessa, who we come to understand a bit and can't help but contrast and compare against Taylor and the choices she's making. So
yeah, completely agree. Absolutely. Well, let's do it. I'm excited.
All right. So quick announcements. We have a winner for the second quarterly We've Got Worm fan art contest. With over half of the vote, Lonsheep's wonderful artwork titled Ball Pit has won our second quarterly art contest. So congrats, Lonsheep.
Yay.
Yeah. We'll be creating a post on the website to show all of the artwork for you guys. So look for the link to that in the show notes. The submissions this time were amazing. Everybody should look at all of them.
Yeah.
So nice job to all of these talented artists.
Yeah, we try not to vote in this contest. We leave the vote up to y'all. But I was floored with what we got. It was some really beautiful artwork, some really creative ideas. It's like exactly what I wanted when I thought of this particular prompt. So thanks artists for doing that. That was awesome.
Yeah. Very, very creative. Lonsheep's was just not anything I would have ever thought of in a million years, but
No.
It was extremely delightful.
Yeah, the detail in it. I feel like we're just hoarding it over the people that haven't seen it yet at this point. So go click on the link right now and look at it.
Yeah, awesome. All right, some quick comments and questions from the subreddit this last week. So Regvlas commented that we tend to use Rachel and Taylor, the names Rachel and Taylor, but we always use Tattletale instead of Lisa. And actually, I to editorialize for a moment, I tend to go out of my way as much as possible to say Skitter when she's being Skitter, Taylor when she's being Taylor, Weaver when she's being Weaver, and so on. In terms of like my discussing them and doing my summary for the chapters. So yeah, Shadow Monk goes on and points out, does a little bit of data mining and points out that there's a bit of a correlation here in the story in terms of arcs 27 and 28. Rachel is used 121 times, Bitch is only used 13 times, Taylor is used 23 times, Skitter 9 times, and Weaver 18 times. So I like that right off the bat because it shows that, first of all, Taylor is thinking of Rachel as Rachel almost exclusively.
Yeah.
And furthermore, that Taylor is being Taylor here, but actually her allies, her hero allies, are calling her Weaver, and her villain allies are calling her Skitter, which is something I think we're going to touch on later.
Yeah, absolutely.
to add to all this, for Tattletale, the name Tattletale is used 359 times, and the word Lisa is used once. And I think that's kind of awesome because it's showing that Tattletale really is being Tattletale here.
Yeah. Well, and it goes, and I think Shadow Monk went into this in his post a little bit too, and I completely agree with him. This idea that, like, even when Lisa's Tattletale mask is cracked and coming off, we don't really even see Taylor shift and start to call her that. I think he specifically says the only time Lisa is used is when, like, it's appended to Tattletale. Like, she says Tattletale and then switches to Lisa in that moment, as if she's maybe finally realizing, I need to treat her as the human, the person under that mask, the person under that identity. And then right after that, she goes right back to calling her Tattletale again.
Yeah. It's interesting because we don't really have this in our daily lives. But like, if you had an alias that you went by all the time and you were called only that you would sort of adhere to that identity, I think. Right. And if somebody called you your normal name, it would feel shocking. It's interesting to think about. Yeah,
and we've talked so many times throughout this project about the importance of names and which names you identify with. The text has made it explicit how important that is through different character interactions. So these things do matter, and I think you're right that we've tried to reflect the names we use based on the reflection of how they're used in the story. And I was kind of happy to see that is true, that we use the word Tattletale more than we use Lisa, and so does the story.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Scott, let's get into the latter half of Arc 29 Venom.
Yes, I can't wait.
So we open things up, and we have Taylor and her crew of her hero and villain allies are deep in the Cauldron base, and they've just stumbled across Satirical and his group of Vegas capes. And we have Cuff saying, "You're doing that crazy mastermind thing again." Which crazy mastermind thing? Where you talk to the other masterminds and one of you leaves something unsaid and the other knows what that thing is without asking. Who's here?
Yeah, I love this because we pick up, like, a lot of times, like, there's always when you jump. I guess this is a little different. I almost went into my thing of sometimes you move arc to arc and you've had a time jump between, but then I remembered that no, we're not actually in a different arc. This is still 29. But we pick up right where we left off, and we have this wonderful line by Cuff that I just like. This is one of probably my favorite lines in the book now because it's so Taylor. Like, we've seen her do this multiple times in the past, but it makes me wonder, she had this whole life with Cuff for 2 years. How many times did Cuff have to observe her do this as part of the Chicago Wards?
Yeah, right. It's pretty funny because it hints at a past between them, which is completely true. Yeah.
And of course the answer to Cuff's question is what everyone thought last week. It's Sion. Sion is here.
Yeah. So, and Satyr knows this. So he explains to Taylor that Sion followed them through the portal to the Cauldron base. And that this is bad news because pretty much all of Cauldron's contingency plans relied on this facility.
It's pretty interesting that the most powerful and all-knowing organization on the planet didn't have a contingency for, hey, what if the interdimensional all-knowing God-man finds our base? Of course, this is one of those things that you say now, but then you realize as you go through the rest of the arc that it makes sense. Exactly, like their plans. There was a contingency for that, and everything they did had a plan behind it. But also you understand why they couldn't predict for those certain things because there are some built-in limitations to this planning they were able to do. Like, everything comes together in a really satisfactory way.
Yeah, there's also the wonderful irony of the fact that all of their plans were ruined by their very creations, very very Frankenstein thing.
Right.
It's the K-53s that they let out into the world and didn't really think about the human cost of what they were doing. It was the hatred that they created there that was their own undoing in the end.
Absolutely, and we see that that thread literally picked up in this one where the death of Dr. Mother is literally at the hands of one of her creations. It's very poetic, both in the abstract and in the specific.
Yeah, couldn't be more perfect there. Yeah. So Satyr tells them the plan was to wait for the group on the other side of the facility to forge their way through the steel or around the steel, but someone gave the custodian a tinker-made super death knife, and, well, that was me, I said. Nothing to do with the custodian.
My bad. This is one of those moments where I think you do realize specifically that maybe, and a moment of inaction on Taylor's behalf could have arguably been better than action. And I don't think I say that to firmly declare that Taylor was absolutely unequivocally wrong in the things she did the last chapter. I just say that to say that the situation is a lot more complicated. And once again, we're seeing her propensity to act first and deal with the consequences later, even if she doesn't fully understand what those consequences are and the full scope of things happening around her. And now things are harder. Now getting down to Dr. Mother is going to take more time, which is the one thing they don't have.
Yeah. And she doesn't really understand what the motives of the Vegas capes are. And I'm not sure if I even do either, actually, which makes it even more tense from our point of view as the readers and vicariously through Taylor, that we know that we don't trust the K-53s. We don't really trust the Cauldron guys who we're about to run into. And we also don't trust the Vegas capes who should be on her side. So it's all very... increasing the tension that we had from the last half of the arc, actually.
Yeah, and I think the way it increases that is exactly through the fact that we don't have a full grasp on even what, like, not only what they want, but why they would want it. Like, Taylor cannot understand what their goal is here, and so she can't get a read on them, and then of course by default, neither can we. So we're kind of in this space of what is going on here. And you're right, that absolutely builds the tension here. Yeah.
So here we learn a little bit about Leonid and Floret, and later a little bit about Blowout, the three other Vegas capes who were there. Leonid can hear everything nearby, and he has claws on his fingers. Floret perceives details. That's her power. And she can also create special multi-purpose buds of crystal that can do a wide variety of things. And Blowout has a telekinesis-based strength power that makes him stronger the more impressed people are with him.
Yeah, and I love how this fits thematically with not only Vegas itself, but with what their role was and how they manage the city. It's very fitting, and it's again some new and interesting ideas. Blowout's power, in particular, is really fascinating. The idea that it's better the more people are awed by it.
Yeah, I also like the moment where Taylor thinks about how their quote unquote secondary powers tend to be their hidden edge, and their ostentatious primary power is almost a smokescreen for their second power.
Right, and I mean that's something we've been talking about since the very beginning of the book, right? That your ability to control what people do and don't know about you and your powers is a great skill in this world, and none more true is that than with these Vegas capes.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that with Taylor, where people forget very often that her sensory power is extremely, extremely versatile and lets her do a lot of things that just control doesn't really cover.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as they make their way collectively toward the group of deviants who are aiming to melt their way through the steel toward the doctor in the panic room, Satyr tells them that Revel, Exalt, and Vantage were all hidden in the cave where the team made insertion, and they'd all been knocked out by Blowout. Taylor worries that Blowout may have blown up their brains.
Yeah, and I think this does a couple things for us here. I think it's helping work towards building that tension we've been talking about. We make it clear that there are powers involved here that Taylor and her team don't know enough about to know exactly the full extent of them, and that some of these powers may actually have like permanent brain damage effects. But again, I also can't help but see the fact that Taylor and her team left behind other heroes in their rush to push forward and move forward. They left people behind unknowingly, as again, her propensity to charge blindly into conflict without stopping to consider everything. And if I had to guess, I'd say we're putting in the work right now to set up Taylor making a angry, venomous, rash decision here at the end of this arc. And it seems like that's what we're doing here.
Yeah, making some hasty decisions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So speaking of that, just reminded me for a second, like, I think Venom, the closest thing I can come to with Venom for this chapter would be the liquid, the vials, there's also the aspect of like the poisoning, the corrupting in some sense of the K-53s that was done by this venom that they consumed.
Yeah. I mean, there's like any name he used, there's tons of them. I mean, that's the literal, the venom of their anger. Sion gets very upset in this arc. Taylor herself gets very upset in this arc. I mean, and then you could think back to the Contessa chapter here in a bit, and how everything around there was poisonous, like in the spot where Fuckster landed. Everything was poisonous and turning people monstrous, just drinking and eating the food and all that stuff. So it's everywhere. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, cool. So this scene, that we're spending time on right now, where they're walking through the halls with the Vegas capes, it's really very tense and enjoyable. They're all kind of aligned with these guys in terms of goals. Get to the doctor, ask her some questions, but Taylor is still absolutely expecting a backstab from the other group, and she's basically planning her own backstab in a sense.
Yeah, she's like slowly transporting her death knife to herself, unbeknownst to anyone else. And you're absolutely right that both sides are just kind of watch each other, and they're almost perfectly suited to ferret out everything the other one is doing, either with superheroing or attention to detail, or Taylor's just ability to notice things. Everyone is good at like detecting each other, and nobody's making a move because they know they can't, and you're just kind of waiting for things to happen. And of course they eventually do, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, right. So I like it when Rachel speaks up. "I don't like him," Rachel murmured in my ear. Imp leaned in to join the conversation, adding, "You do know that Leonid can hear everything that's said in a certain area around him. There's no point in whispering," as if she hadn't just found that out for herself. "I don't like him," Rachel said full volume. And I thought that's cool just because it's funny for one thing. But the following scene where Satyr can't like get the edge over Rachel is cool, because even a well-practiced con man wouldn't necessarily be able to pull anything over on Rachel based on how she is. On the contrary, she's seeing through his facade and reading what's really going on with him under the surface.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right here. And I think over and over again, we've seen that while Rachel's inability to understand human behavior tends to be a detriment, it also offers her this unique perception on things. She can't understand intentional, refined human emotion, but she can detect our instinctual, animalistic reactions to things, the natural ingrained responses that we try to hide from people, but often can't. And as you said, it makes her perfectly suited to both resist Satyr's charms, as well as be able to detect and ferret out the true meaning behind the way he's behaving. And it's really good because it shows once again how useful and smart and capable Rachel is. If I had one complaint about this, it would be that I don't think this pays off directly in this scene in any kind of real way. Like Taylor is already pretty suspicious of them, and we already kind of know that they're a moment away from attacking just through Taylor's suspicion. So Rachel's insight doesn't really clue us or Taylor into anything that we didn't already know here. Like I love it as a character beat for Rachel, but it doesn't do much in the moment.
Yeah. I see where you're coming from. I guess it adds to this element where everyone here is so hostile to each other that it really doesn't take much to set them off.
Yeah.
And this would be one drop in that bucket. But it's really just mainly characterization, I would say.
It is. Yeah. You're right.
Less of an auxiliary plot function than.
And it has paid off in the past, and I reserve the right to see it pay off in another way in the future. But I just like in this moment, I just was hoping like maybe she would detect something that no one else had or something. Yeah. And that didn't really happen.
Yeah. So Taylor wonders why Sion is taking his time coming down through the facility, and Satyr monologues that he thinks it's because of the abundance of Case 53s in the facility. Sion doesn't quite know what to make of them at this point. So they're talking about this idea of the Case 53s being like his corrupted spawn, and Shadowstalker chimes in. "Something foul," Shadowstalker spoke for the first time since we'd been split up to escape the cell. "Broken, wrong, loathsome, damaged, and no parent wants to face the fact that their kids came out less than perfect." The sphere Imp had tucked under one shoulder jerked a little.
Yeah, this is a really interesting beat here. I think we kind of expand upon this further later in the chapter and the arc itself, that that Case 53s not only were created as a way to test, but these deviants were specifically created as a way to fuck with Sion on a mental level, to distract him and confuse him and kind of provide them with a smokescreen against him. And I think that's interesting because it goes down to the human element again, that Cauldron is so divorced from the humanity of their actions that they're basically creating like human shields in these monsters. Like they're so not even people to them anymore, that they just exist only as their purpose. And their purpose here is just merely to exist and confuse the guy, not to do anything more specific than that. Just stand in the area we need you to stand in.
Yeah, right.
And the part I love at the end, though, is with the sphere moving a little. Like, we're going to have some really emotional moments with poor Sveta here for the rest of this arc. And this is the kind of the beginning of it, when we see she heard everything that they just said, and it really hurt her, and it breaks my heart.
Yeah. That part is very, very important, and I want to spend definitely due time on that when we get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is going to happen pretty soon.
Yep.
So they partially open Sveta's ball to find out more about what happened, because she was there for all the infiltration events. And they learned that the Doctor and Numberman and the Harbingers, new band name, and Alex Tender are down in the panic room, and they're all together, and Contessa isn't with them.
Yeah, I support your band name. However, I have to insist that we call the Pretender Alex combo Fozandria.
Okay.
Actually, now that I say it out loud, it looks better written than it does say out loud, but it's too late. We've gone too far.
Yeah. Speaking of things that look better written down, it was Numsy and the Harbingers was what I wrote down, and then I was like, that doesn't actually sound right. So anyway, yeah. So the lights, just something to point out is that like the lights have been creepily flickering and going out and going into emergency mode, and just being really creepy this whole time, pretty much this whole arc actually. And finally they go out and stay out, and in the darkness, Satirical starts splitting off a clone, and a Weaver senses it and tells him to stop immediately or she'll attack.
I love this moment because like right as the lights go out, you have Satyr just say Weaver with a question mark, and it's like, is he accusing her of doing the lights, or does he just know that now that the lights are out, this is what's coming? And that escalates the tension to completely new levels, and it gets you to this feeling where like you really think that neither side wants to fight. Like, we know Taylor does not want to fight. We know Taylor's like, this is ridiculous, we don't have time for this, we have to go, we don't have time to fight these people. But you get the feeling that this conflict is just inevitable. Like, this is just going to boil over no matter what. There's too much mistrust and doubt and seediness on each side of this thing to where it's inevitable.
Yeah, and she's bringing her nano knife to her too. So
yeah,
they're all preparing for a fight, and so it's clear to her that the Vegas Capes are preparing to attack, which is true, even though she's also preparing to attack. So she and Satyr talk openly, him admitting that he doesn't trust her, doesn't trust the straightforwardness of her stated motives.
Oh, isn't that so great? Like, we know, or at least we think at this point, that Taylor does not have any real or ulterior motives before here. She's actually being fully 100 right here. Like, she's just saying, I just want to save the Doctor, get some answers, and then kill Sion. That's all I want to do. But Satyr is so used to people messing with him with these lies, with these half-truths, with the deceit, that the idea of someone being fully trustworthy makes them less trustworthy. It's this tangled mess of like probably years of ingrained lying and deceiving and everything. And again, it seems like it's just inevitable. It's just who they are. Like, this was just going to happen.
Yeah, she does seem to have a minor ulterior motive that we'll get to in a bit, that she doesn't even admit to herself in her thoughts, which is a fun little unreliable narrator moment.
Yeah, we will definitely get to that.
Yeah, so Satyr messes with them, telling them that it's the Cauldron Capes who get twisted bodies and the natural Capes who get bent in the head. He explicitly says this to Rachel, and we see, as we suspected, that she already knows. Yeah,
and what a heartbreaking moment, right? And I love the detail here. It's like, My heart dropped out of my chest. I closed my eyes. Yeah, Rachel said, her voice quiet. I clenched my teeth. That's right, she went on, a little louder. And so not only do we get to see Taylor's concern here, both for the situation at hand that she's quickly losing control of, and then just the well-being of her friend, but we get to see Rachel processing this information. And I'm sure that on some level, Rachel has always known, like you said, that we've commented throughout the story that we've seen her like notice more and more specifically how Taylor is treating her. Like the way Taylor approaches things to her, like Rachel's been aware of it on some level, but this is the first time it's been stated so blatantly to her face here. And it feels like this moment of true realization to say, yeah, quietly. And then that's right louder in this moment feels like we're seeing both her realization of the truth and then acceptance of it in that moment. Like she fully realizes it, fully digests it finally, and then accepts it and moves forward with it. And that's something that I just don't think beginning of the book Rachel would have been capable of doing. Like I think she would have lashed out here, and Rachel is not the one that starts this fight. And that's so different from everything we've seen of her earlier in the book.
Yeah, I think she's almost owning it. She's
right.
It doesn't really hurt her. Maybe it hurts her a small amount, but then she's like, yeah, that's how it is. That's how I am.
She accepts it. She owns it. Yeah. And that's a big part of the end of this arc and the book as a whole is identity, right? And accepting the person you are and going forward with that in mind. And that's a huge thing for Taylor. It's what she's been searching for this entire time. And here we see in the last arc before the climax, this is Rachel's full acceptance. Yes, that is who I am. You're right. I accept that, and I will live with it.
Yeah. Just to skip forward a little bit, where Marquis says the people who are fighting on the front lines are the people who most know who they are, and who's one of the people who leaves to go fight immediately.
Yep, it's Rachel.
It's Rachel.
Yep.
Yeah. So Lung, who's here, he loses patience with the talking, and he uses his fire, providing illumination. And now that everyone can see, one of the Vegas capes sees the death knife.
That was hilarious.
So this triggers the fight. The Vegas capes all spring their attacks on the heroes, using an obviously well-practiced combo attack. But despite this slight edge of surprise, the Vegas capes can't win. There are too many strong combat powers among the good-ish guys.
Good-ish, good. I think that it reinforces the desperation, how desperate Satirical was in that move. He knew he wasn't going to win, but he fought anyway. He escalated anyway. And why? Well, I think we'll get to that in a sec.
Yeah. So Imp ends the fight, even though it was basically already over, by stepping into the middle of the group and opening Sveta's ball briefly.
Yeah, and so it really struck me here, Matt, that Taylor describes this move of Imp's as, quote, insane. Like the thing that she just did here was insane, because to Taylor, they've won. The end of the conflict is inevitable. They have the upper hand. They've won. Why not just finish it? The idea of de-escalating once you've done that is something so foreign to Taylor that when Imp smartly does it and stops the conflict, de-escalates everyone and makes sure no one gets hurt, she's like, that's insane.
Yeah. Right. You took a slight personal risk to do that too.
Yeah.
Because one thing you think of is like, oh yeah, that is kind of crazy. And you're like, actually, M probably would have been fine if Sveta had gotten out.
Right. And she didn't even open the ball. She just threatened to.
Right.
She just has the bargaining chip and uses it. It's not that insane.
Yeah. So Satirical finally explains, I guess. I'm not sure how much of this is me not understanding and how much of this is Satirical being extremely vague on purpose, but basically he says it's for love in the end. We couldn't have gone down there without getting revenge, without falling to our greed and arrogance. So I was willing to wait, to sit back and put it off, to tell myself we didn't have the firepower, didn't have the numbers we needed to take on a group at the stairwell. Wait until it was too late.
Yeah, and I think we're going to try to crack this as well as we can. I'm not 100% convinced either, but I think if we look at Satirical as a character and we look at what we know about him and his relationship with Pretender, we can at least see that I think on some level he's being partially true, or like he's not completely lying. So if we look back at the interlude in Arc 24, we see Satyr and Pretender talking. This is right after Pretender has taken over Alexandria and joined up with Cauldron officially. We see that Satirical clearly does have some feelings for Pretender. He says Satyr held onto the hand, caressing it. They say you shouldn't marry your best friend, and now that you're a woman. And he's joking, but you can kind of tell there's some half-truth behind that joking. So there is definitely some more than just friendship feelings there, at least from Satirical side.
Yeah, and we see Pretender like flinch visibly when Taylor later tells her that Satyrical's dead. Yeah,
and we also know that the Vegas Capes as a group in general are fiercely loyal to each other. I mean, the whole reason they left was because the Protectorate had the audacity to arrest Pretender for murder after he murdered someone.
Yeah.
So like we see like that they're so loyal that like they consider that outrageous when it seems perfectly reasonable thing to do. But we also see them kind of talk about the fact that it's possible that all of the Cauldron Capes are Case 53s on some level. Like they're talking about Alexandria and how she doesn't age and doesn't change, and that she's a Case 53, I suppose. All of us may be. And Satyr says all Cauldron Capes, and Pretender nods and says to some degree or another. So that, again, you get the feeling that that they might have the same level of anger as the Irregulars have, that they have been betrayed or lied to or something by this organization. So we add all this together, and it's not hard to imagine that Satirical finds himself in a place where, just like the rest of the Irregulars, he's angry at Cauldron. He feels lied to. He feels betrayed. He feels played by people, which is something that he isn't really good at handling. And also, he's in love. So he's mad at this group. He wants to take them down, but Pretender's there, and Pretender's with them, and he's more with them than he is with the rest of the Vegas Capes, because he left them. Like he abandoned the group to go with these other people, and so he's like in between a rock and a hard place. He Cauldron lied to him. They manipulated him. They stole away the person that he loves and forced that person to reside in this Alexandria body. He hates them, but he can't kill them. Not only would he have to possibly fight his best friend and possibly a guy he loves, but he would possibly end the world also by killing them. So when Satyr is caught between these two difficult choices, he does the one thing that Taylor can't understand ever. He chooses to do nothing. And I think that's the big thing here. And that's, to me, why Taylor can't understand him, because that's so different from how she would ever handle the situation.
Yeah, thanks for articulating all that, because all those elements were bouncing around in my head. Like I saw those pieces, but you kind of saying it all out like that, I'm just like, yeah, I mean, it's the true answer is definitely somewhere in there, and definitely has to do with him and Pretender having some degree of feelings for each other one way or another.
Yeah,
and just deciding that he can't really do anything other than go after Cauldron, but he can't do that either. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. And I love how that plays off of, I love like the idea when I kind of stumbled on the idea of Satirical choosing inaction, which is something that Taylor can't fathom.
Yeah.
I love how those two things play off each other. And that's why we see Taylor like so frustrated by like, I don't understand what you're doing. I don't understand why you're doing it. None of this makes sense to me. And that's because that is just a core element of her character, that making that choice, or rather not making that choice, is something that is unfathomable to Taylor.
Yeah, and once again, this is another cool thing where the narrator influences how you perceive the story, because us being in her head, we're kind of like, I really don't understand why Satyrical's doing this. This is
Right.
This is inexplicable, and it's because usually, I mean, Taylor's pretty sharp. She usually does understand people, especially when they're making vicious choices. And she's able to follow their rationalizations, and thus so are we. But due to our perspective, we're like, I don't know, pretty mysterious. But all the pieces are there, like you say.
Yeah.
I also like later on, Panacea is just kind of offhandedly like, all the Cauldron Capes are tougher. So it's this kind of confirmation that the Cauldron Capes are all a little bit physically different.
Right. Even if the balance formula made no noticeable changes, they're all a little bit different. It's a little bit against what was designed.
Yeah. So Satirical tells them to go on. The Vegas Capes will stand down and not bother them anymore. Taylor's group makes a break for the tunneling Case-53s, and the Vegas group just kind of stands there in Sion's path.
Yep, so they're all dead now. Part of me wonders why Satirical didn't just, like, make a clone and hide. Like, are the clones, like, exact? Like, if it's the, like, does it have to be the original him that survives, or can it just be a random clone he sends off somewhere? I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I don't either. It's cool. It's a fun power idea, and we don't really know the answer.
Right, because if I were him, I'd always, if it's literally any clone is him and can work off him, I'd just always have one like in a room halfway across the world or something.
Right. Or I mean, he seems to be able to see through or communicate through his clones in some way, because he always knows what's happening with his other clones. So if I were him, I would just be like Nilbog. I would just be like in a box somewhere.
Yeah, that's true.
So they come upon the Case-53s that are tunneling through the steel. They kill them without hesitation or remorse.
Jesus. They just like totally destroy them.
Yeah, and then Shadowstalker flees like a coward again.
Classic Sophia.
Yep. So 29.7, Taylor and her team slide down the giant, fun anthill water slide that the Cauldron Capes have dug for them.
Matt, these bug references are killing me. Like, everyone's a bunch of bugs. Everyone. We're all bugs.
Human-sized bugs going down through the anthill.
Yep.
They emerge into a crowd of harbingers and get owned pretty handily. The dogs are pinned. Kind of cool how that works, just showing how versatile his power is. Lung is restrained by Alexandria. It takes Taylor a few minutes of getting stomped to realize that they're Harbinger clones she's fighting, and even when she realizes that, she doesn't stop fighting. And when she gets, like, not even really an edge, when she just, like, loses less badly for a second, Alexandria just throws Huntress at all the heroes and kind of crushes them.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty poignant and hilarious inversion of that Satirical conflict only a few minutes prior. Like, in that conflict, Satirical and them were fighting Taylor's group even though they never had a chance to win, and now we have the same thing but reversed. Yeah,
I agree. That's interesting. Lung very kind of brashly tries to incinerate all their opponents, including the people who they came to talk to, which Taylor realizes would have made their whole mission pointless if it had worked. But luckily the Siberian has made them all invulnerable already.
Yeah, so would you say that all of our characters at this point are behaving completely irrationally, and Taylor has just total control over them? Like, she's just really, really great job controlling her team at this point.
Oh, yeah, she's definitely got Lung well in hand, specifically.
Yeah.
And Shadowstalker, oh, wait a minute, she's gone.
I want to see a version of this where they do come out swinging and, like, somehow manage to overwhelm them and kill everyone. And then everyone's like, yes! Wait, what were we here for again? And then, like, Lung, like, triumphantly, like, holds up the head of Dr. Mother. And Taylor's just like, oh, oops.
Yeah. Well, I think Satirical had a point where the natural trigger capes are so bloodthirsty that's fairly practical that would happen.
And we know that for a fact. I mean, like, they're designed that way. Like, that's what the shards were designed to influence that. All joking aside, though, I think this really does serve to get into Taylor's state of mind as we move towards the end of the book, right? As she's losing control over this team. Like we see throughout this entire fight, like, she's more and more frustrated by the fighting, and she can't stop it. And, like, we see her multiple times say to not just Cauldron and all those people, but to her team as well, stop fighting. She's talking through a swarm. She's yelling at them, stop. But they ignore her just about every time. And, like, that the amount of frustration that builds in Taylor is quickly mounting. Yeah. So here she does end this fight by telling the doctor that Sion is here. A conveniently timed shimmy through the structure backs up her statement, and the doctor is willing to believe them. Thanks, Sion. Those made things a lot simpler for us. Good looking out.
Yeah. It saved us. So Number Man apologizes to Rachel for the behavior of his clones.
Yeah, he says that they're more based on hearsay and speculation than actual fact, and I love that because it's still the same power. They're just using it in a more interpretive way than he is in a factual way, and that it serves to once again remind us that the clones are not exact copies of these people; they're facsimiles.
Yeah, I did think it was funny that he's like, I was more efficient, and what I read that as like, I would have just killed you. I wouldn't. I wouldn't have wasted time hurting you. Yeah. So that they leave this part of the panic room and they walk through the hallway containing their stock of formulas, which is almost empty, which they've handed out willy nilly after Sion's attack started.
Yeah, can I just say here like how much we play in trope in this story without it getting like obnoxious and old. Like we're here at the end of this book and we're in the evil organization's secret lab and the hallway is lined with vials that are like the fruits of their cruel experiments. And like, this is something that like has been done so many times in films and books and games. Like you get to the end and you're in the lab of the bad guys and you see you're diving down into the lab and seeing more and more of their secrets. And yet here, it feels not tropey and not cliche. It feels like a natural escalation of everything that's been happening. And I think, again, that's because it's rooted in an understanding of these people as characters. Because is Cauldron kind of like a mad scientist's wet dream gone amok? Yeah, but that's not all they are. They're so much more than that. And we take this classic end of story location and almost turn it on its head here. And I love that we can do that in this book. And these things are all familiar, but somehow still new.
Yeah, I agree completely. I feel like this is earned. Whereas, because you're exactly right that like this scene where they're walking through this hallway of vials, it reminded me of nothing so much as a Goosebumps novel, which is, which may sound like kind of like an insulting comparison, but that what I mean is that you're exactly right. It's a classic set piece, but it makes perfect sense that we're here. Like none of it is for affectation. There's no affectation here. There's no like, oh, and wouldn't it be cool if they then walked into a hallway with vials? It's like, no, they have the vials here because they rely on the vials for the power transformations, and they have them all here because this is their stockpile that they're using, and it all makes perfect sense and it's logical.
Yeah,
that's how we got here. We all understand why this is here. It's not, it's not like you're looking at the scene and you're like suspending your disbelief, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great.
Okay. Yeah, so now at this point, and this is very, very important to the whole story in terms of themes, Sveta starts to speak up. She tells the doctor that she has memories from her home before she was taken by Cauldron. She talks about how she knows she used to draw, but she has trouble doing it at all now. The doctor is brusque and uncaring at first, saying, "We've caused you difficulties." Sveta says that the K-53s came for her when she was delirious, and the doctor tells her, "We gave you a second chance." Sveta was probably going to die, and we're reminded that when Alexandria found the boy in the war zone, he was dying, and she asked him if he wanted to live. Sveta tells her now that she would rather have been dead at any point along this journey than have lived this life.
And there it is. There's the rub, because when you hold this up as a choice between life and death, sometimes there are things in life that can be worse than death. That worse than this choice between living and dying. Like, I don't know, for example, being tortured in a time loop for all eternity. Wait, which organization was it that made that power again? Who was that did that? Oh yeah, it was these guys. But seriously though, I think that you're absolutely right that this gets to the core of the themes of this book, because that's something we have talked about multiple times, about the idea of making choices for other people. And this is something that Defiant specifically chastised Taylor about. I think it was back in Arc 20 when she was killing Alexandria and trying to decide which side she wanted to end up on. That's a choice you just made for a lot of people. And when you act on behalf of others, you are robbing them of their own choice. You are robbing them of their own agency and their own decision of their own fate. And that is inhumane and cruel.
Yeah. Yeah. So this dialogue between the doctor and Sveta continues. I understand, the doctor replied. She sounded a little impatient. Then damn me, curse me. Tell me I will go to hell for what I did. At the end of this, I will face any and all punishment that I'm due, alive or dead. For now, we see our way through this. You don't get to do that. You don't get to get off with words and sentiment. So here we're really hammering in those themes of guilt, culpability, and justification that we've seen through Taylor's story all along. And just like we've seen with Taylor, Cauldron is right in an immediate utilitarian sense, but at an immense human cost, a cost paid by the Case-53s that they victimize, and a cost paid by the doctor herself, and as we'll later see, by her partner Contessa.
Yeah, and I love that you're absolutely right that from a calculating perspective, that the choice here seems obvious, that of course what they did was the right thing. But the thing that I love so much about this damn book is that there are no easy answers. That none of this is simple, and none of this is a quick decision that you should be able to make. And the thing that I think, like, when we've been doing this for a while and we have discussions with people, and there are many people that listen to this podcast that vehemently disagree with me on some of the more gray aspects of morality present in this book. And I think that's fine. The part that gets to me is people that make it seem like it's an easy, obvious choice, that not only disagree with me, I think it's fine to disagree with me, but to say, no, this is obvious, this is easy. 1 million people is obviously greater than 10,000 people, so that's easy, right? And I think that what we're saying here is no, like, that's not so. Sveta here is specifically here to remind you of the cost of that choice, the human cost, not in numbers and statistics, but in the angry, broken emotions of a little girl that you turned into a monster. And in your efforts to save humanity, you have done incredibly cruel things to humanity, to humans, to the world. And you can sit there and you can chant on and on about your greater good, and you might be right. But here is Sveta, this poor girl who just has to sit back and watch her life be destroyed, watch herself turn into a monster, watch herself turn into a killer, and you took life away from her. You took her life, you took her meaning, you took her humanity, both literally and figuratively, away from her. And taking responsibility for that doesn't fix it. It doesn't make the problem go away. So I just, these are not easy choices. These are not easy things to decide on.
Yeah, another thing we've talked about fairly frequently is the trolley problem aspect of uncertainty, and how life is never so clean as saying, here, pull this lever, right, and it'll switch the tracks, and it'll turn out to be the utilitarian correct choice, and you won't find that if you had just known that if you unscrewed this screw here, then the train would have just gone off the rails and no one would have been hurt, right, or whatever. And what we find out, what's funny about all this is, like, we have this feeling, perhaps subconsciously, that Cauldron has been following Contessa's path to victory this whole time.
Right.
And that victory is in some sense assured. Mm-hmm. But we find out in Contessa's interlude that that's so far from the truth that she actually doesn't, I mean, maybe this is overstating it, but she doesn't know what she's doing. The doctor is the one coming up with ideas, and right, Contessa's kind of saying, like, yeah, okay, build an army. Yeah, well, we can certainly do that. Like, yeah, I can make that happen, but the victory that Contessa is not on the path that is on the path to is not save the world. That's not it. And you're right. Yeah. We see that, like, this all-knowing, self-assured organization that has convinced itself that every step it takes and every cruel and terrible thing it does is at the course of the greater good. And they know it is because they have this person who literally sees that path. But that's not the truth at all. Yeah. Yeah. Because as we'll see, she's blind to Sion. And right, so everything is really their best guesses, which is really no better than Taylor ever does at anything.
Yeah,
in terms of trying to do good and getting a huge amount of collateral damage.
Right. But they've convinced themselves it'll all be worth it. And it's like you're pushing yourself to a moment where it has to be worth it. Like, we have to keep going because there's nothing else at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, so the doctor angrily asks if Sveta wants her to mutilate herself to pay a penance. Sveta rejects this as well. She can't even pay the penance. She can't ever pay it. Instead, Sveta wants the doctor to say her name. The doctor doesn't know it.
This is so good. This is so good. This is the core of it. Like the whole idea here is with Cauldron that to save humanity, to save the world, you must abandon your own by doing these things to other people. And like we said, this has never been more clear in this moment with Sveta. And then you see that there's no way you can make this right. There's nothing you can do, but the one thing you can do for her, is validate her as a human being. Say her name before she was a monster. Acknowledge that she exists, that she is a person, and you did this to a person. Remember who I was.
Yeah.
And who I am. And she can't do it. She doesn't remember her name because in order to do this, in order to push forward this, she had to reject the side of her that saw these people as human beings. And therefore, learning her name, we've seen that throughout the whole thing, they assign them numbers. They assign them numbers so they never look at them as people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we're jumping around a little bit, or I am anyway, but I always think it's really interesting to see how the doctor behaves very, very differently when she was younger, because she hasn't had to put up this cold veneer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
just another mask.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Yeah. She even has her fake name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sion arrives in the corridor behind them, inspecting the vials.
Yeah, and this is one of a few beats we're going to get throughout the rest of these chapters where we see Sion doing something, and because we understand him on a pretty good level, we can kind of guess what he's thinking or what he's doing in these moments. We don't get to ever see it directly, but we're kind of there. We can almost feel what he must be thinking looking at these things, and I think it just goes to show you how much these interlude chapters are to fill us in on the motive of these characters.
Yeah, I agree completely. You're very much with it. Yeah. So Taylor asks if the doctor has a power, and she says no, she doesn't. Lung points out that this would be a good time to obtain one, since there may not have any more chances. Interesting aside here, she mentions that there are no healing powers, just healing as a side effect of other powers, which I like.
Yeah, in retrospect, it makes sense. If the whole point of these powers was to breed conflict and destruction, the ability to heal should probably be considered part of that.
Yeah.
The interesting thing and I didn't write this down, but the doctor says that she has the potential to trigger in her naturally, and therefore, if she were to take a vial, she has a greater chance of mutating, because apparently, if you have a natural trigger and you take a Cauldron vial, that you might mutate or deviate more often, and that is interesting that we see. Like, I think we learn exactly why she never became a cape later on. Like, I think it's very important to the success of the organization that the person heading it, that is working with Contessa, is not a person with powers and is outside of this whole thing. But also, like, you see Sveta in this moment go like, oh, so you are willing to do it to other people, but not yourself. And it's like another little dig.
Yeah. Yeah. And at this point, she's ignoring Sveta. I just like this little tiny bit here where Manton leaned over and gave her a kiss on the cheek. Out of sync, doesn't fit, like Number Man was complaining about with his clone.
Yeah, just a little bit different. Yeah.
The group reaches the vials that the doctor wants to take. These are vials with a foreign agent, somehow less limited than the typical Cauldron powers. Eidolon and the Extreme Deviants are the others who took vials like these.
So Plan Z and Cauldron is to make a Doc Mom Dolan.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah, the foreign agents are interesting though, because we can speculate on what we think they are. It never tells us in this chapter. I don't know if you'll know by the end, but it seems like they're either the second entity's shards that it was always planning on keeping itself, so it never like protected them, so that humans would. Like, they were never meant to interact with humans in any way. So they force deviations. Stuff goes crazy with them. I think they specifically say they don't cause people to forget their trigger visions. So So yeah, I mean, I guess is that they're probably part of the dead entity, maybe shards that it didn't intend to ever give out, or they're the ones that came from the third entity that flew through and mucked everything up.
Yeah. I don't really. I actually was walking into this with the idea that they were from the third entity, but I do like your idea that they could be the like private shards from the dead entity, because especially like when you think about what Eidolon's power actually is, it kind of seems like the kind of thing that the entity would have kept to itself.
Right. Yeah. The ability to pull whatever it needs and suck power from other shards. Yeah.
Yeah. So the doctor takes that formula, mixes it with the balance formula, which she thinks is a power or collection of powers calibrated with humans in mind, which safeguards against physical deviancy.
Yeah, so this is literally what they did to the shards to make them palatable to us, and they found a way to break that down and include it with everything.
Yeah. I wanted you to go ahead and state your observation about the echidna vial, which I think is accurate and not something that I thought of when I first read the story.
I think we do that later on.
You do it later? Okay, never mind. Sorry about that.
We will do that.
We will do that, yes. All right. So Taylor asks about second triggers, and the doctor explains them. A second trigger is a shard networking with nearby shards to recalibrate its power in an attempt to save the host. She says Cauldron has managed to stage second triggers, but even with their resources, including Contessa, the host usually dies. And Taylor is really visibly disappointed, despite the fact that she doesn't think to herself about this fact.
Yeah, almost as if she had some kind of ulterior motive here. It does make you wonder, like, Brian's the only one besides the King of Cups that we've seen have a second trigger. It makes you wonder what shards he is recalibrated with to get his new power, because there were tons of them around. So, like, his power is borrowing power. So I wonder where he got that from. Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I guess we'll probably never know.
Interesting to think about, though.
Because he's dead.
So the doctor says the powers are poor. Foreign, yes, but poor. When we tested these, we got a defensive power utilizing warped space, and a power that allows one to take over a nearby parahuman's mind, body, and powers automatically on death. The one I hold should have attack or mover capabilities, if not both. So,
we'll probably get to this in the interlude a little bit here, but she's not being completely honest here, is she? She's kind of underselling how important these vials are.
Yeah, I'm less clear on whether we're talking about the same vials.
I mean, I know Contessa says later in her interlude that she lists 3 vials of the foreign stuff that she considers to be Cauldron's Hail Mary. So if these are them, then yes, Doc Mom is definitely underselling the power of these things. I don't know what other ones they would be. I thought that she made it pretty clear that these were the last of this type we had. So I don't know which other ones it would be.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of it, because that sounds like potentially like, Menya and Fenya and Butcher that she's describing here, which are good powers, but not game-breaking powers. It's like if those are, that's speculation, by the way. I'm not sure, but like if that's what she's talking about, then yeah, those aren't gonna save them from Sion.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So Taylor is obviously thinking about ways to increase her powers at this point.
Yeah.
And it's really, really interesting from a narration point of view, because she's not thinking about how desperate she is for power. She just keeps asking questions that are like, what if I take a second vial? What if I take one of those vials? Second triggers? No.
Third trigger? What about third?
Third trigger?
Is there third triggers?
Yeah, triggers. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think this falls back into Taylor is an unreliable narrator at times, because you're absolutely right that she never specifically admits that her primary purpose for being here is to find out exactly how to make herself specifically more powerful. She says she's here to save Cauldron, get some answers, and then eventually kill Sion, but the get some answers portion of that is a little more specific to her than she had let on to even herself. And again, yeah, this is Taylor's unreliable narration in full effect here. That this is something that we notice that Taylor seems completely ignorant to.
Yeah, doesn't she bite her lip at one point?
Yeah,
which is a fairly un-Taylor like expression of anxiety.
Yeah, that's right after she learns about that second triggers cannot be reproduced.
Yeah. So above them, the Siberian engages with Sion, her body intersecting his. He just moves on, uncaring.
It's rude.
I know. They briefly debate the right approach to take in fighting Sion. The Doctor and Numberman argue that he's alien and abstract, and abstract approaches are the way to beat him. Taylor disagrees, stating that it's his human feelings that make him a threat.
And it's an interesting argument that kind of ties into people's outlooks on the value of humanity, but also we've talked about just a few minutes ago that Cauldron, the human element, is one of the things that they kind of abandoned on their quest to save humanity. The idea of individual humans and what makes people human. They've always dealt in the abstract as they were making the decisions, and Taylor here is standing as the counter of that. And I think we see throughout the events of these next couple chapters that Taylor's kind of right, at least. Like the way they get out of this with their life is by appealing to the human emotional side of Sion.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, at this point, the Numberman scans her head with a thing and tells her that Scott was right. Given the signature, it's very possible you had 2 trigger events in quick succession. Not uncommon. The horror of manifesting your power. It prompted another trigger.
Oh, the ball is gone. It's out of the park. It's gone.
Yeah.
No, this is it's funny because I tweeted ecstatically about this when I learned that I was right, and then someone was like, "You mind telling me how you came to this conclusion?" And it was so long ago that I did not remember. So I had to do some research. And I think in the Crusader interlude, we learn that there is a popular theory in the world that capes have second triggers immediately occurring right after the first, and they aren't even aware of it. That's something that it's felt like we were bringing that up deliberately. And then we see both Echidna and Chevalier noticed that Taylor's power was unique and either smelled or looked different. And I admit that, like, in the moment when I learned that Taylor was the Queen Administrator and her shard was unique and different, I thought, oh, well, that's what the smell and the look was. It had nothing to do with the second trigger. It was just that. So I'd kind of given up on being right about this one. But and it's very possible that is literally what Wildbow was trying to show with Echidna and Chevalier, and it had nothing to do with the second trigger, but it led me to this, and I was right. So, hooray!
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I always remember, like, on reread, something that I noticed was when Taylor first describes her trigger event to the Undersider, she talks about how she basically had that mental breakdown, went to the hospital, and was just overwhelmed by all these, like, all this sensory input that made no sense and was just driving her crazy, and didn't understand what it was or where it was coming from. And when I read that on my reread, I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, she had this horrible experience, and then her brain is overwhelmed by a sensation that means nothing to her, and that's maybe where her power kind of recalibrated and gave her something that she could actually use, perhaps.
Yeah, that's very possible. Yeah.
So Sion, finally having tired of investigating the vials, puts out a shockwave that blows all the remaining vials and all the lights, including the vial that the Doctor was just starting to drink. So it says, and she'd said she needed a whole power. Would a partial dose only give half a power? A distorted one? I could only guess.
Oh, we can do a little more than guess, Matt. We know exactly what happens when you do that.
That's right.
This is what you were talking about earlier, though, because if we get down to the technical nitty-gritty of this, Noelle happened because we say specifically in this moment that the different formulas tend to unmix after time, and the balance one floated to the bottom, and whatever Noelle drank, whichever one it was, I can't remember, was at the top. So Noelle took almost entirely the one formula without any of the balance to counter it. And who was the other guy? What is his name? Oliver, thank you. He took almost entirely balance. So this vial, on the other hand, was just mixed up. So in theory, that same effect would not happen on Dr. Mother here, but we don't ever get to find out, though.
Yeah. It is really interesting that Oliver took something that was just designed to make him seem really human.
Yeah, so he became kind of just every man. He just could change his face to look like any kind of human. Right. It's very interesting. Yeah. I don't know if that was ever specifically confirmed, or was that just me putting things together? I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't know. It makes perfect sense, and it's one of those things where once you said that to me, I was like, oh yeah, that's obviously what that is. Yeah. Especially considering what Oliver's power is, you're like, that's it's the power to seem human, which is right.
Good job, Oliver.
So at this point, we see that Sveta's sphere was also cracked in the detonation, and as Sion appears at the top of the stairwell, the ball shatters, which is an awesome moment of just being so rock bottom. Sveta immediately attacks him, and the good guys flee through the tunnel in the wall made by Siberian. But before the doctor can slip inside, a tendril snags her by the hand, followed by more and more of them. Each one chose the doctor as the mark. Had to pick someone, Sveta whispered. Couldn't focus on him alone. I'm sorry, but you're the best choice. And she constricts around the doctor, crushing her into a bloody paste.
Rest in peace, Doc Mom. Man, isn't it true that the choices we make and the things we create just so often end up destroying us? You just better keep an eye on your kids. This is what I'm saying, Matt.
Oh, I know.
They're out to get you.
I know that.
They're out to get you.
Believe me.
Sleep with one eye open.
Oh, I do. It's very tiring. So I want to focus on this next bit a little bit because it's fucking crazy and it's really easy to overlook. I don't know if I ever really processed this until this summary. So instead of running with her friends, Taylor stands in Sion's way and stabs him with her nanoknife.
Yeah, the man who just stood there casually while Siberian just stood inside him, continuously intersecting him. She's like, I know what'll work. This knife. It's an insane decision, and what's more, we don't even really see her think about it. She just does it. She's being almost entirely driven by her anger and her rage here. She's mad, and we saw how upset she was that the reason she came down here doesn't seem to be happening. She was hoping to get answers that led her to greater power, and that's not happening, and she's lashing out here. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's pretty much it. It's borderline suicidal. I don't know how she expects to escape from this, because yes, he did just ignore the Siberian, but it's possible he ignored her because he knew she was a projection.
And he didn't eventually. He ignored her for a while, and then he killed her.
Yeah. So she has no reason to assume that he wouldn't just crush her, and so it doesn't do anything, obviously. And he just kind of prepares to push his way through the door that's supporting the whole structure. And then Taylor does the next thing, which is to grab Sveta by the face, who immediately repays her by pulverizing all the bones in her lower arm. But because she's sort of tangled with Sveta, at least she avoids being crushed when the ceiling gives away and everything falls.
Yeah. So, Matt, in a way, we know Cauldron created Sveta. We know Sveta just saved Taylor from dying here. If Taylor saves the world, then mission successful, Cauldron. You did it.
Yeah.
Everything was worth it.
It was worth it.
Yeah.
Poor Dr. Mom.
I love the moment, though. Taylor's first in shock reaction about her arm getting crushed is, I just got a new one.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Poor Taylor. Poor Taylor's limbs.
Yeah.
How many limbs has she lost?
I don't know. Bugs lose a lot of limbs, man. You just pull them off,
It's true. Yeah, good point. The dust settled, and I saw what Sion had come for. His partner.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. This is one of those parts of the story where I really forget that you don't already know about this. You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff where I'm excited that you're going to get to it. I'm like, oh, I can't wait for Scott's reaction. And then there's stuff like this where I'm like, oh, right, Scott's not aware of any of this.
The garden of arms?
The flesh garden, and this is where the powers come from. Yeah. So yeah, 29.8. The vast room beyond the door is containing the second entity. The entity is a sprawling experiment in the human form, a jumble of body parts, a jungle of flesh, all the aspects positioned gently and non-threateningly, beautiful in their way, always projecting vulnerability or benevolence in some subtle way.
Gross. Like, I think this is really well described. I can perfectly imagine what this setting looks like, but where I draw the line with that is describing it as beautiful, because like even if it's benevolent and vulnerable, it's still like faces and arms and legs and things,
veins and nerves for that matter,
and it's like all in different direction. It just gross. It's gross.
Sounds beautiful to me, Scott.
Okay, when you're
sounds really deeply beautiful. Yeah. So yeah, Taylor's arm is ruined, and it's only her durable silk suit that keeps it from being severed.
Yeah, in an alternate universe, Taylor says, "Can anyone lend me a hand?" And then Rachel just like throws like 100 of the jungle arms at her.
Yeah, but she's not on her quip game right now because she's basically in shock. So Sveta meditates, forcing her body to let go of Taylor and retreat.
Yeah, and this is what I read at the beginning of the episode. I'm not going to read it again here, but I read it there because I loved it. This meditation that she has, the idea of my mistakes do not tear down this building I've constructed. They are part of me, but they are not the most important part of me. And not only is that beautiful and tragic, but it is fitting with our characters, right? Like the mistakes you do, the choices you make, even the bad ones, they are part of you, but they don't define you unless you let them.
Yeah, and here we have Sveta actually mastering herself, pulling herself away, and doing something that we've, practically speaking, never seen Taylor do. Stepping down.
Yeah.
Taking control of herself and her aggression, and it's cool to see. Mm-hmm. So yeah, a lot of the text in this chapter concerns Taylor dealing with this injury that she has. So I'm just going to kind of front load talking about it. It's the kind of injury that normally does just put a person into shock due to its severity, but due to its extremely rapid onset and the convenient lack of actual blood loss, she's not really in shock yet. She's just having some pretty traumatic sensations, and it brings an edge of panic to her thoughts, which she's not used to having. Why had I touched her? I hadn't been planning for her to save me. Hadn't even been aware she could. She thinks to herself.
A passenger. A passenger. What?
It could be passenger, but she is just having this. She just has this like weird streak of semi-suicidal behaviors. So
yeah, but what? I mean, like at least the Sion suicide made sense. It was like, I'm going to try to kill him. What does grabbing Sveta by the face do at all? Is it like, I'll save her? Let me just grab her by the face and save her?
I do think she had a thought of saving her, maybe grabbing her and using her flight pack or something, but it ends up being the other way around, sort of.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We also see like she views the injury and increasingly her body as a inconvenience more and more throughout this. Yeah. She's just annoyed by it as she's slowly going into shock.
Yeah. She makes her way into the chamber, holding the entity, using her flight pack to coast along. It's hazardous because her bugs keep getting sucked into other dimensions as she moves, and she senses her allies hiding below in various small groups.
I love how, like, we're just, like, casually talking about bugs getting sucked into different dimensions now. Like, the status quo in the final parts of this book have just gone insane. That these things are just normal and accepted, and like, well, yeah, I mean, there's portals to different dimensions everywhere, so just suck into it.
Better watch my step. I don't want to lose a foot in a dimensional hole. Taylor realizes that this is the entity's well, and then later on in the chapter realizes that this is only part of the well, the part in this dimension.
Yeah, which is kind of confirmation that, reducing that surface area that Legend was so optimistically clinging to will probably just never work. Like, there's just too much. There's just too much of it.
Yeah. She crash lands near Lung, and she's kind of come to him for help, but it's kind of a bad time, kind of a bad choice. So he monologues at her, which is something she points out, telling her that he doesn't like being a follower. He encourages her to accept that she's dead, and she kind of flops her ruined arm toward him. He continues explaining that he keeps trying to fight Sion because he can't give up. It's not in his nature to give up. Nearby, Rachel is coming to help, but Taylor warns her off. She knows if she asks him for help, if she admits weakness, then their non-partnership, their alliance, whatever it is, will be gone. And this is one of my favorite Skitter moments. Reminds me of Don't Fucking Underestimate Me, where she's completely at a disadvantage. She's in shock. She has a grievous wound. She's basically Lung is saying, like, I'll put you out of your misery now, I guess. And she says, "I'll kill you." I gasped out the words. He didn't react except to squeeze the arm harder. Again, my back arched. I writhed, gritting my teeth. With a trick, deception, by asking for help. I shook my head. He reached down and picked up the disintegration knife. With this, I shook my head again and immediately regretted not having spoken instead. My vision swam. I had to fight to keep my eyes on his. He didn't follow up with another question. "Come on," I thought. "Can't hold eye contact." He grunted. "Burn it," I said. "If you're angry." I had to stop to get my breath. "Angry?" he asked. "Me beating you twice? Then enjoy burning me. But fucking burn it off." And then he does.
Holy shit.
Damn.
God damn.
Yeah. And then later she comes to, having passed out, being carried by Huntress. Her arm is gone, and she's completely flaccid with trauma.
And like, it's so telling that the people that Taylor understands most, the character traits that Taylor understands most, are the people like Lung, the people who are all about violence and respect through power. She gets those people, and she knows exactly how to deal with them. It's the other kind of people that confuse her, like Satirical. She doesn't get Satirical, but she gets Lung, and she knows exactly what buttons to push to get what she wants from him.
Right. And on a certain level, I mean, what's so like fun about that is that's sort of a facade for her, but that's sort of just who she is. It's I know I make a lot of Breaking Bad references here, but like she is just sort of this monstrous person who is talking to this other villain in terms that they both understand. Yeah, you're right that she's finding the right thing to say to him, but also that's just her. She's a vicious survivor. So
yeah, she is part Heisenberg. I think you're absolutely right. She's a very complicated person, and I wouldn't ever say she's as monstrous as Walter White becomes in Breaking Bad. But yeah, that is absolutely a part of her, and we see that explicitly at the end of this arc.
Yeah. So she's basically just like flopped onto Huntress, not moving, but she's using her bugs now to lead Lung and Rachel to the others, while she's practically catatonic in her own body. And she also finds Sion standing before the central body of his partner. At this point, she realizes this isn't even the companion's whole body. The body passes into other dimensions, as we said before.
Yeah.
So Taylor reasons that Sion looked for futures where he found his counterpart and got this one, not what he had in mind.
Yeah, and once again, we can imagine exactly what he's going through in this moment, right? If you treat him like the kind of child that he is, then you can see the vast levels of anger and disappointment and despair here. And this is an interesting wrinkle in our whole path to victory thing, right? The idea that the end of your path might be the thing you want, but not exactly in the way you wanted it. And I think that's going to be really important, not only to our discussion of Cauldron and Contessa, but like something that is going to matter to the end of the story as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. So here we find that they don't have a name for it, or at least the number man doesn't know the name. I was only recently made aware it existed, the number man said. The doctor played things close to the vest. I'd be open to suggestions. Fuckster, Imp offered. It's not even a living thing anymore, Golem said. It's more like a place, a garden or something.
I like that everyone ignores Imp, but also nobody gives it a name. So,
Yeah.
like, Gollum's like, oh yeah, it's like a garden or something. No, it's Matt. Matt, we're calling it Fuckster. I don't care what the fan name is. I don't care what Wildbow says the name is. Imp has spoken, and Scott concurs.
Yeah, you're not going to follow on that garden reference?
No.
Nothing there, I guess?
I could get there. My head is turning right now, but I'm refusing to acknowledge it.
Yeah,
that's what I'm doing.
All roads lead to Fuckster.
Stop. It's what it is. There's nothing I can do. It has been decided.
Okay, all right. Let's go with it. So Sion kills the companion and then pulls the body with him, unsettling the structure support of the whole room. He uses his light to burn away the remains of Fuckster. The number man tells
Embrace it.
The number man tells him it's all going to collapse soon. And here we have, he was lashing out, destroying the remains out of bewilderment, sadness, despair, anger, confusion, all of it unfiltered, the same emotion a child might experience with their first loss, what a child would feel when they lost something irretrievable for the first time, when something was stolen from them, and they hadn't prepared themselves for the possibility on any level. It's like when I lost Rolo, Brutus, or Judas, Rachel said. Yeah, I said. When my bro, Imp said, trailing off. How do you even articulate that? When he was broken, Taylor thinks. Yeah, I said. Fucking good, Imp said. I hope it sucks for him.
Hey, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Matt, Brian's dead.
Oh.
Hey, Matt, look at this. Brian's dead. Yeah, Imp's just talking about when he was broken, not when he died. We're sitting here looking at Sion, looking at a loved one dead, and the first thing Imp thinks about is her brother, and then stops talking. But yeah, she's just talking about when he went through the stuff with Bonesaw. Yeah, that's what it is.
Those are some very interesting words.
So, question here, and we didn't write this down. Did Taylor consciously connect this to her loss at all? To her mother? I don't think she did.
No, I don't think she did. No, I don't think she thinks of her mother at any point.
Yeah,
here.
which I think is something that we'll be paralleling more in the future. But that's very interesting that she listens to all these people talk about the first losses they experienced, the irretrievable loss that they had, and she doesn't put herself in that position at all. Yeah,
that's true. She's kind of detached, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know. Also, it's been I was gonna say it's been a long time, but it's been almost as long as it had been since Rachel lost her dog. So it's not like it should be that much less immediate.
It's also it's your mother. Like, that doesn't, like, you might get to a better place, but it is always going to be a big thing for you.
Yeah.
But I really do like that we're intentionally pushing this Sion as child imagery. We've been doing it a lot, actually. Like, we part of his growth throughout these last few arcs was seeing him grow into adolescence, and so we compare him directly to a child learning about death for the first time, almost, which kind of makes sense because he's this entity that is so far beyond all that he can't really understand what death is on a specific level. And to complete our trauma metaphor, he has this thing, doesn't know how to deal with the emotions, doesn't know how to process it, and so he's lashing out, and he's bullying, and he's destroying, and this antagonist suddenly, like, without even fully realizing it for me until these last arc or so, has become just a perfect reflection of every single theme that we've experienced in this book so far. And, like, I did not see that coming. I did not see, like we've moved so big and we've gotten so, like, otherworldly and alien, and this is giant interdimensional entity, but when it boils down to it, its conflict is something terrible happened to it, and it's sad and angry about it. And that's beautiful. Like, that you can distill this worldwide, dimension-wide conflict down to that one kernel that started this whole book off.
Yeah, it's the impact of trauma on a human mind, essentially, because it's the human part of his mind that's making him feel things about it instead of just sort of being like, oh, this is not a desirable outcome. So
Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah. And we'll get to some more of that in a bit, I think. So they start dealing with the fact that everything's going to collapse on them. Golem extrudes a giant steel hand, and Cuff helps shape it to the appropriate size. They hide under it, and Siberian makes it impervious. Taylor's distracted trying to think of ways to hurt Sion because Taylor.
Because and this is when we're starting to really push the comparison between them, right? Like Sion's in the middle of this rage-filled burning of his loved one, and Taylor is in her own little trauma-fed rage. I hate you. I want to hurt you. I want to kill you. She's her own little thing, and they're both just doing their thing.
Yeah. We got Sveta off to the side here trying to control herself and not do that thing. But, yeah. So she asks the number man to help with a controlled demolition to collapse the whole thing on Sion's head on cue. She talks to Sveta and asks her to throw pieces of the companion at Sion, which she does, messing with his head just before the collapse.
So, okay, I know this is like a really extremely serious moment, and Taylor's like barely alive, and everyone's angry and hurt and dying, and we're desperately trying to fight this guy, and it's this depressing, sad moment as well. I know all of this, and yet Sveta tossing chunks of fuckster at his loved one is the most fucking hilarious thing I've ever read in my entire life.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if I found it funny per se, but it is a very like shocking image. I mean, I feel the shock of Sion in this scene because it's like, how dare you?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's such a out of left field thing to do.
Yeah, like to even think of doing.
Yeah, like even when Taylor thinks of it, I'm pretty sure when I first read the story, I was like, I don't think that's going to work. I think you're just going to get Sveta killed.
Yeah. But
it does work because he's so like shocked by it that he doesn't react as quickly as he could.
Yeah. And I like that you said like that Sveta's off to the side trying to de-escalate, and then Taylor swoops in and pulls her back into the escalation, pulls her back into the violence. And there's this moment here where she says, "Thank you, Sveta. Count this as another brick on the structure that you're building." And Sveta doesn't reply. And part of me wonders, would she call that a success? Would Sveta think that helping out in this was a success in her building of herself, or another one of those slips? And I wonder, I wonder.
Yeah, I think it might even be neither, because it's like it counts as just violence. It's just like,
right.
Her body was probably eager to do that.
Oh yeah,
she didn't seem to have to force it. So yeah, anything her body wants to do, you can almost guarantee is a bad idea.
Right.
Or at least giving in to violence.
Yeah, at least not the type of person she wants to be, not the building that she wants to construct.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Yeah, that's a great interpretation of why she's like not responding. Yeah, so they use Alexandria to enter to collapse the ceiling, first having her swallow a fly.
Matt, just like, remember when I drowned you with bugs? Please put this fly in your mouth.
Yeah, I promise.
It'll just be one this time.
Something about scorpions and frogs, I promise, though.
I won't coat your lungs with them.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's perfect.
So the hand does protect them after the collapse, and Taylor is able to sense Alexander approaching. Sion has blazed his way out straight up, providing them all an exit.
Oh, good. Now they've just pissed off Sion. It's a great adventure.
Yep. Good. So mission accomplished, Taylor. So Taylor decides that it's time to make a hasty exit. Shadowstalker and Sveta can fend for themselves. It's urgent that they bring the footage of the garden to Tattletale and the other heroes.
Yeah, I just want to point out here that you originally typed, "It's urgent that they Brian the footage of the garden to Tattletale." And I was like, what? Brian? Dead? Where?
Did I?
Yeah, I fixed it for you. But I was like,
weird.
It's very weird. It's like Freudian, Matt. You think about weird Brian?
Freudian mistake.
Think about footage of Brian?
Thinking about footage of Brian somehow. Yeah, I don't know. I maybe don't read too much into it, but I am wondering where my head was exactly.
Matt, me reading into things is kind of my job here, so
No.
It's like
Not
asking
into
Taylor
what
to
I'm writing.
de-escalate. I can't do it.
It's true. What have I done? Okay, so we have, as we've talked about, we have Taylor slouching around with her head hanging and doing everything through her bugs, including talking. And Imp says that she reminds her of the old Skitter, saying, "Creep factor 1,000. You're just standing there, and you shouldn't be upright with the way your weight is, but you are because of that flight pack. You're not looking at anyone when you talk, not even opening your mouth. When you're talking, you don't pause for breath or anything, and there's no emotion in your voice. I'd almost think you bit it, and your ghost lives on in the swarm." She waggled her fingers as she drew out the last word.
Yeah, this is absolutely Taylor disconnecting herself from her humanity. And I think it's like Imp is talking specifically here about what Taylor was like as old Skitter and how this is reminding her of old Skitter. But in those days, she was creepy and scary for a purpose. It was fear. It was to lead by fear and not show weakness and always be the powerful one. And here, like, this is just her being her now. Like, there's no purpose to this. There's no thought to it. She's just doing it.
Yeah, just piloting her body in the most utilitarian fashion.
Right, and like I hinted at in the last chapter, that reflects the fact that she sees her body as an inconvenience. And she even says that. We didn't talk about it then, but the quote is, "Whatever, right now at least, my body was an inconvenient puppet, a vehicle for my power and my brain, nothing else." And she doesn't care. Like, she's like, this is explicitly the losing of your humanity. And here we go. This is moving us into the preparation for this final choice that leads us into the climax.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. This is following on her essentially losing most of her body and having it replaced with kind of a weird body that she wasn't used to.
Right.
And now she's lost another arm. We're not even sure if this is the same arm that she
lost
before.
To think it is.
Yeah, I think it probably is. And so that was already like a step away from her familiarity with her body and her comfort with it, and now it's even worse, I guess. Yeah,
this body that was so important to her, that she was so self-conscious about, that we talked about throughout the course of the story, that she started off wearing baggy clothing because she was conscious of it, and the switch to more form-fitting clothing and the switch to looking at herself in the mirror and not being ashamed. This was growth of our character. This was change in our character. We're here now where we don't even care about it. The limbs that she has, her body itself is just another tool in her toolbox, a necessary thing to keep her power and her brain running.
Yep. So they reach the floor with the portal leading to the cave, and they head through, meeting up with Shadowstalker. She has no patience for Nyx and Spur's games. They aren't forthcoming with the location of Taylor's allies, so Taylor just leaves. Golem and Cuff stay behind to guard them. Taylor thanks Golem for being human and caring about Revel, leaving Taylor free to care about everybody else.
Yeah, and this is once again Golem falling back into that role, right? The person that can care about people, the person that can stay behind, leaving Taylor to do the big other thing. Also, Golem was totally into Cuff, and now they're alone playing guard duty. So nice. Yeah,
I'm sure they'll get up to something.
Yeah.
So the rest of them
gonna reach that hand into something.
Yeah, they have some complementary powers, if you know what I mean. Don't know where I was going with that, actually.
I don't know.
So the rest of them take the Dragonfly back to the in-progress battle. Cape's Leviathan, Dragon's Teeth war against Sion using fortifications created by Khonsu. But after a handful of minutes, it's obvious that Sion has won. He's not even being methodical anymore. He's not experimenting. He's just efficiently destroying the enemy. He's venting through anger.
Yeah, and we see, like, this is the first time we see Leviathan engage with him, and it's like, they've got Leviathan now. Remember when this was a huge fucking deal? And it doesn't matter. It's immaterial. Just another thing that Sion beats up. And the thing about this part, like, it's so incredible as Sion, like, fully goes into his attacking, and I love this part where it says the camera afforded the glimpse of Sion's face, tinted an orange red by the force field between Sion and the camera. His eyebrows were drawn together, lips just a little tighter together, lines standing out on his throat. And then Wildbow completes this beat with, he hadn't changed his expression once in the time we'd known him. And I love this because, like, it'd be very simple to just say, Sion looked mad. And instead of just saying Sion looked mad, it's like we paint a picture of what his face looks like and then finish that off with, hey, his face has never changed. And we don't even specifically say his face changed here. It's just, look, he looks mad. By the way, that's way different. And it's such a great way of conveying the difference between this kind of attacking and all the other attacking we've seen him do so far. This is human. This is rage driven. This is anger.
Yeah. And it's a kind of anger that you believe, like he's not acting angry to scare people. He's actually failing to hide his anger that he's actually feeling.
Right.
Which is more visceral, I think. So at this point, the number man points out that Taylor doesn't look so good, and Rachel goes to keep her company.
Yeah, with a classic, I'm not doing this because he told me to, but because I want to line, which is great. I love Rachel so much.
Yeah, it was funny and heartwarming at the same time.
Yeah.
Just this little beat. Gimel was entirely different. Nilbog had been hard at work creating a horde of minions. Buildings had been reinforced, shored up with the shelves of what looked to be obsidian. Capes were gathered in bands, and all were at attention, ready for an attack at any moment. Cool.
Yeah, totally. The totally chill place. This just an army of Nilbog monsters and obsidian buildings. It's like you take this and you think back to the moment where Taylor and Lisa stood over this thing and watched how people were coming together to survive. And now it's like fully shifted over into just another place where we're going to fight a battle. Yeah.
I can't help but imagine, being on the fortifications surrounded by gibbering Nilbog minions. And,
right.
Hey guys. Hey.
It's amazing. It's amazing how quickly we've gone from like Nilbog was this thing that was locked in this town because we just didn't know how to solve the problem of him to, hey, he's part of our final stand now. And he's a key part of it.
Right. It is. I mean, and it makes sense because everyone from Endbringers to Nilbog to pretty much every monster of every stripe is on the same page when it comes to, I like living in the world. I like having a world. Right. I like being alive. So it's in our best interests to fight this other guy.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So at this point, they land and they all head to Panacea's hospital. Amelia is there with her dad and their whole birdcage gang. Taylor demands that the others be healed first. But at least first, Panacea gives her some pain relief. Taylor at this point finally explains that her pain tolerance is due to a sensory recalibration from one of Bakura's bombs back in the day.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I don't know if it has been explicitly said in the story before that has come up in conversations between you and me and us and the rest of the community about this detail. And I think it's great because it is very easy to write Taylor's seemingly high resistance to pain off as just another form of plot armor. We can't have her get so hurt that she's debilitated, so we just have her magically be able to work through this stuff. But we see once again that Wildbow's commitment to detail does not allow that. He has to have a natural in-world reason for this. It can't just be because she's our protagonist.
Yeah, and I think it serves the story too because she's not a brute. She doesn't have durability other than her spider silk armor. But it has been convenient story-wise that she's not always getting hurt, and then half of her narration is like, I was in a lot of pain and distracted by that.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah.
So Tattletale arrives, and they give her the lowdown. No real hope of better powers going the Cauldron route. And then Taylor tells her that the main thing they learned, though, was that Sion was wrong. He can see the path to victory, and from the vision we saw, we know he can make mistakes. He plotted for a future that would be sure to reunite him with his partner, and he got his wish. It was just that his partner was brain dead, gutted, useless. And they also learned that he can be affected emotionally.
Yeah, and like we talked about last week, I think the pieces to the Sion puzzle are all here. We know everything we need to know to defeat him. It's just a matter of how to execute on the information and how to mount a sufficient enough resistance to be able to actually use those things about him we know. And of course we're quickly leading up to our solution for that. How are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to do it? And Taylor is going to find a way, because that's Taylor.
Yep. Yeah. So Marquis makes tea for everyone, and he then waxes philosophical. He points out that the ones still fighting on the front lines are, in his words, the ones who know who they are. Or in Taylor's words, they're the monsters, the crazy people.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's definitely like, that's where she interpreted, and that's not where he was going. He, I think, specifically says, that's not quite how I would have put it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is back to our theme of identity, and we talked about this earlier in the arc as well, when we were talking about how you view yourself and how you accept the different parts of yourself, and how Rachel seemingly was able to do that. She knows who she is. She knows what her role is, and I think we hear an echo back to Glenn here as well, when he told Taylor, to embrace both the good and the bad sides of you, because those are still part of you. And you can connect this back to Sion, right? Like, he had a role, and that role was taken away from him with the death of Fuckster, and he was lost and confused for a while, and then he found another role through Kevin Norton, and then that kind of got taken away from him, and then someone gave him a new purpose, and then someone killed his buddy, so he went crazy. Yeah. And that's like finding your identity, finding your purpose, finding what your role in all this is, a central theme throughout this whole thing. And this is, Mark was kind of laying it all out for us in this moment.
Yeah. And we talked earlier to call back to how Rachel is one of those ones who both sort of probably counts as a little crazy, and also definitely knows who she is at this point. I think it took her some time, but I think she does now.
Yeah.
So Sion arrives at this location that they're at. Bonesaw and Panacea finish healing Doormaker, and when he's rejoined to the Clairvoyant, the doorways begin to open again. Most of Taylor's team goes outside to fight, and Panacea comes over to finish sealing up Taylor's stump. And when she comes over, Taylor admits that she had an ulterior motive in wanting to go last.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the only two people that are left now are Taylor and Lung, right? Like, everyone else immediately stood up and went out to fight. But these are our two characters who are lost and seemingly without a role, so they stay.
Yeah, and Lung is at first tries to pretend that he's happy with this new role, but then he's like, this isn't big enough for me. Yeah. So Doormaker opens a door to relative safety, and there's a short break where everyone files through into this cave. Taylor then says that she feels like she's close to coming to a conclusion on this question she's been pondering. She feels like she has the potential to do more than what she's been doing. Panacea tells her to think back to a time when she was the strongest and to times when she was the most scared. And Taylor does that and finds that those were the same times. And Panacea says, I think those are the times when you're most like you. And it sucks, I know. It's horrible to think about it like that, because at least for me, it wasn't a time when I liked myself, just the opposite. And then a bit later, I nodded. The image I'd seen on Glenn's computer screen crossed my mind, me unrecognizable even to myself, surrounded by my swarm. I'm just a little bit of a monster, I thought. I can't put the blame on my passenger. I exhaled slowly. I could hear the Seamers screaming. So other than being super ominous, like storytelling and prose, I like just this idea. I like this idea that you are most like you when you're most scared, and because or when you're at your strongest, because it's you don't know who you are until you're under pressure, I think is a truism.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think it's very interesting though, and I think we'll get into this when we see what Taylor's decision is. But Panacea here says, like, that's the time I liked myself the least, and I didn't like that me, and then I did something about it because I didn't like that me. And Taylor's interpretation of this is, because she desires that power so much, is if the time when I'm most powerful is when I'm most scared and I'm most unhappy with myself, then I just have to accept and be that person. And that's, of course, that right there is Taylor's tragic flaw. It's like the recognition that you are a monster is character growth. It is change. It is realization. But Taylor's tragic flaw is that she has these realizations, but they don't change her behavior. They just reinforce her behavior. And
so she just doubles down.
Yeah. It's like, I fully accept that I'm a monster now. And no, I'm not going to try to be a different person. I'm not going to change myself with that realization. I'm just going to come to terms with it.
Yeah. So she finishes this up by asking Panacea to help her to remove the walls, the restrictions on her power, to deregulate it.
Oh no! Actually, she asks Bonesaw first, because Bonesaw's so we're going to Bonesaw to say, please tinker with my brain. Yeah,
and Bonesaw recommends that she run it by Tattletale before pulling the trigger, because it's kind of a big deal. You don't want to just go monkeying around with your brain like that. Says Bonesaw, that character. But Taylor knows that Tattletale would stop her.
Yeah, and I think she says, like, we're being very upfront with the consequences of this decision. It's like Bonesaw is telling her 90% chance that you lose yourself, that this messes with your brain to an unfixable level, and don't seem to care at this point.
Yeah, and there's so much character stuff going on here, because you're seeing Bonesaw's character change, where she's basically being pretty much a good person here. Like she first recommends that Taylor run it by her friend, and then Panacea says she'll do it, and then Bonesaw says, you don't do brains. I'm inexperienced, Panacea said, but even inexperienced, I think I can do a cleaner job than you, and Tattletale's less likely to catch on if you aren't sawing Taylor's skull open. I wasn't talking about experience, Bonesaw replied. Panacea stared down at her hands, covered in tattoos with a rich, vibrant red in the gaps. So in the first place, we have Bonesaw again being like sensitive enough to be like, I'm not talking about an experience. I'm saying that the last time you did brains, you really regretted it, and I don't think you want to go there.
Yeah.
And then Panacea acknowledging that in a nonverbal way, but going through with the decision anyway.
Right.
And then Taylor thinks, I'm sorry. It wasn't an apology for the consequences of the first note. No, Dinah hadn't approached me since then. She hadn't decided I'd fulfilled the terms and deemed it okay to finally contact me again. 2 words telling me that something ugly was going to happen, directed at me. So we're again ominous, hitting that ominousness and calling back to some foreshadowing from arcs and arcs ago. And then, of course, Panacea laid her hand across my forehead, and it all went wrong.
Yeah, so that this is it. This is the moment, right? And I want to talk about this forever. So like we've like I said way earlier in the podcast, we've been playing in the final. We've been in the final act of Worm for I think probably a couple arcs now. But there was one more thing we needed to get through in order to shift into that climax, and that was this no looking back final choice, the climactic choice that our protagonist has to make. And this is it. We're here. This is the choice. This is the moment. And this is the moment that shifts and focuses the climax into what it's going to be. And we're here. And like with everything else in this book, it is amazing to me that this choice is a simple thing, is am I willing to give up my humanity to access more power to kill the bad guy? And the answer that Taylor comes up with is yes. And you can take that one relatively simple choice and tie it back to every character moment that Taylor has had throughout this book, every moment of conflict, every moment of crisis that she has gone throughout the entire book is tied up in this one little choice. The need to have a purpose, the need to have a role, the need to escalate situations, to the trauma surrounded by being trapped and powerless, the trying to find your identity, to the ability to look past or ignore consequences for the sake of that power. It's all there. It's all there in this one little choice, and that's everything. It's everything.
Yeah. We've set up this character so perfectly and meticulously and consistently that we know she's going to make this choice, and we understand her so well, and even, you know, when you're reading the story the first time, and if you're reading it quickly and you're on Team Taylor, you're actually like, yeah, which may sound insane to you since you're reading this in a much more analytic way, but right. But seriously, like you're like, yeah, go for it, because this whole time you've been egging her on, even though her aggressiveness and escalation hasn't necessarily been healthy for her. And I wanted to say also, yeah, I mean, it's resonated through this character, and it's very consistent with this character, but it's also a theme that has echoed throughout the entire story through many other characters. You've had easily a dozen other major characters, like Alexandria, that is the first one that comes to mind, where they're a person who is forced to make this kind of choice of, do I stay as I am, or do I take a risk and change myself? Which is something every Cauldron cape has to do on a level, because they're making that choice a lot more deliberately than a natural trigger. Yeah, you're right. And we've seen so many of these characters regret their decisions in a way where they get way down the line, and they have become essentially a different person than the person who made that decision. And it's a very consistently explored theme, but interestingly never in a way where it feels overwrought, you know. That's actually somewhat surprising to me, that some of these themes can be so pervasive, and I think the answer is that they're so subtle. They're not beating you over the head, they're just there.
Yeah, well, and it's all tied to character, so it doesn't feel preachy, because this is something that's rooted in the choices of each and every one of our characters, and the type of people they are. So yeah, you're not beating themes over your head, because it's not Wildbow standing on a pulpit and saying, this is what I want to say about morality. This is what I want to say about making decisions for the greater good that end up doing bad. He's not making clear-cut moral decisions throughout this. He is, like he does with everything, painting every single side of the issue and showing that the issues are more complicated. I mean, from terrible Nazis to evil organizations that kill thousands to scared little girls to the bullies of those scared girls. Like, everything is deep and rooted in character and those people's essential humanity. So it is not like you said, not like overwrought and overdone. It's just, this is just who these people are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's exactly the appropriate level of buildup that we need to get to this climactic decision.
Right. And I want to say again that, like, this is a moment of realization for Taylor, where she says to herself, finally, she admits to herself, I am a little bit of a monster, and I am going to accept that part of me. But the tragedy is that I cannot change that. And it's a tragedy both personal, in that she is not the type of person who can turn down power or turn down the role that she's assigned to herself, or turn away from being the one to make this call. So that's a tragedy internally, but it's also a tragedy externally, because it's almost as if the world of this universe is demanding that Taylor be that person, is demanding that this poor, formerly 15-year-old girl that just got shoved into a locker has to be the person to be the monster, because the world needs that monster. And that's tragic on its own too. And it's not fair. And it's really sad. Like, it's really sad that we're at this moment where it seems very clear that in the story that Taylor is going to lose a fundamental part of herself, in this choice. And like I said, we don't know exactly how this all unfolds next arc, but it very much paints a picture that she has crossed a point of no return here, and the results are going to be devastating. And yeah, it's exciting to get to the climax of this book. I'm very excited for it, but this was really hard for me to read, and it's like you see it coming and there's just nothing you can do about it. And that's exactly her too. Like, she was always going to make this choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I could kind of go on and on about this and make comparison to Alexandria and all these other characters, but I think this stands as it is, and
I think the only thing we can say about that is, yes, every other character in this, we've tried to relate them back to Taylor every time we saw them, and that's because every other character in this is going through some sort of similar process and similar movement, and the ability for the story to tie itself all back to each other is one of the things that I love the most about stories, and I think like that's something that Wildbow does really well here, and here we are with everything coming together. Yeah, right. But we're not done yet.
Nope, we have the final interlude, which is of course another character who's worth comparing to Taylor. But we start out with the Thinker entity flying through space and time and dimensions. And we see that this entity is much more philosophical, and it's considering the end goal of the whole process that the species is undergoing, a complete and total mastery of all things. And somehow the worm species must find some solution, some resetting of universes, reinvention of existence, something beyond the zero-sum competition that dominates their species, so that they can continue in some unlimited way.
Hey, Matt, someone needs to teach Fuckster about the SMART method for goal establishment.
Oh, okay.
What is that again?
It's a specific, measurable, achievable, relevant time.
You're such a nerd.
I know.
My favorite part about this, though, is yes, how stupid this makes Sion feel by comparison. I think a lot of this arc has been centered on painting Sion as this child, like we said, and the writing itself established it as well. This entity is smarter, more equipped, better in just about every way than Sion, at least mentally. Sion's he's dumb boy, little dumb boy.
Yeah, it's funny how he does seem a little dumb, because of the way like he keeps sending her messages, and she's like, I'm like way ahead of you there. Sure, whatever. I'm saying she because that's the form that she takes, and
I think that's fair.
Not really true though, but
she codes her weird garden as female, so we're gonna do it too.
Yeah. So the Thinker prepares for the arrival at the destination planet, performing deep simulations, focusing. It doesn't get irritated per se, but you can tell it would prefer that its partner stop sending it broadcasts, like we said.
Yeah, it's like the end of a really long day, and you're just trying to drive home, and like you're in the middle of planning out what you're going to do for dinner, and your stupid kid in the back seat just keeps screaming "destination" at you, and you're like, "Yeah, I know where we're going, Johnny. Shut the fuck up."
Now you've made me want to teach my kids to do the whole destination trajectory.
Please don't tell them to shut the fuck up, though.
No. We'll do a back and forth where I say agreement. Yeah, now I'm going to do this.
You need to record that, and we will put it as bonus content in the podcast.
All right, we'll do. So the Thinker at this point detects the mysterious third entity approaching. The Thinker chooses to meet with the third, and they crash together in space, exchanging shards. The Thinker is pleased with this. It has found shards concerning philosophy and psychology and imagination. New possible futures are opened up.
Yeah, and it's like, so like we're seeing Fuckster grow up. I'm going to keep doing it. You can't stop me.
Okay, all right.
Like moving past the idea of just simply conflict. But I like that. Philosophy, psychology, imagination. It's maturing into an adult state almost. And it makes you kind of wonder what things would have been like. I mean, I'm sure we see that very specifically, but in this moment you're like, oh, maybe it's going to learn that conflict isn't the only solution. Well, not quite.
I had that same thought where I'm like, oh, maybe it'll like think of more philosophically motivated ways of solving the problem that it's trying to solve. But no, you see that what it does is it looks to the future again, designing an optimal outcome, and the future vision simulation, whatever it is just as bad, if not worse, than the world that actually came about.
Yeah.
It sees a group of capes discussing the arrival of new super weapons, quote unquote, and the inevitability of war between the other nations. The Thinker and its partner, who is obviously basically Sion, take the form of a woman and a man, assuming the role of powerful capes in this world.
Yeah, could we just, before we get into this proper, I just want to talk about how great the transition to this is, because Wildbow uses those page break icons, which I think is just a square, and moves us forward into a new section and a new scene with brand new people that we don't recognize at all. And it takes you a while to kind of get your bearings in this new scene suddenly. And it isn't really until a good way through the section that you realize what is actually going on here. And I like this because Wildbow has kind of, like, books teach you how to read them as you go through them. And one of the things we've grown to understand is that interludes themselves tend to break established rules. You've had interludes that hop from perspective to perspective. You've had interludes that stay in one. You've had interludes that cut back and forth between time. They don't necessarily follow standard rules. So you almost don't even know what's going on at this point. Like, are we breaking trend again? Are we not? And it's just a fabulous way to kind of subvert expectations as you move into a new section.
Yeah, I agree completely. And part of the fun here in this section, once you get your bearings, is puzzling out who is who, because we've got capes named Arsenal, Clarent, Partisan, Black Knight, and we recognize some of their powers, some of their weapons. And in some cases, we recognize given names like Richter and Hannah. And so it's, if you reflect on it, you get that these are the people we know, actually. But these are, I think, only the older capes, the ones who were, I'm gonna whiff this, but I think it's all the ones who must have been born before around 85, which is when Sion showed up. Mm-hmm. And the timeline diverged, I guess. I don't know if I'm interpreting that quite right, but
I think you probably are. Yeah.
I think we notably only see like the older Protectorate capes.
Yeah. Would you like me to take a shot at who's who?
Yeah.
I know there's probably clues in the tags, but I haven't looked at them because I don't do that. So this is me just taking guesses. Some of these are like fairly obvious. Like Miss Militia is very clearly the one that's named Hannah that has guns. Right. Richter is Richter. Right. They do use the word Colin. And Arsenal is using a halberd. So I'm guessing that Arsenal is this future's version of Defiant. The one called Partisan, they seem to take a very long time showing that Partisan is giving inspirational speeches, which immediately made me think of Chevalier. And then Partisan goes over and like has this side conversation with Hannah, with Miss Militia, which reminded me of the fact that those two had a thing for a little bit. So that's what I'm guessing there. He doesn't have his cool gunblade though, which is, it's really sad. He just has, I think he just has a spear.
Yeah, I think he might have been wearing armor. I mean, I think you're right about that guess. I didn't bother to recheck the tags, so I'm not 100% sure on any of these.
And then they describe Clarent as a person who has a power that gets stronger over time. And the only capes I could remember that specifically have powers like that is our poor Frozen in Time guy Dauntless from the beginning of the book. And then also Crawler, like, gets more powerful over time, but that's weird mutations and different. So Dauntless seems like a pretty good guess. Black Knight, though, is one that I have no idea. I sat with this for a while. I think we learned that, like, he always wins when he fights capes.
When he fights Parahumans.
Yeah. I don't know.
So there was another important character who had a strong advantage and couldn't be defeated against Parahumans. But
is it Jack?
Yeah, I think that's the implication.
Oh yeah, because yeah. Oh, weird. So he's like a good guy, huh? I was trying to think of the good guy, so I didn't even go there, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's cool, and I mean, I like that this is as brief as it is, because if it doesn't really bear to like dig too much into this, it's just like that's fun.
Yeah, it's just fun. Cool.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Arsenal is suspicious of the two entities.
Good old Arms Master, always suspicious.
Yeah. I mean, I like that it's him too, because we're like, Colin.
Yeah.
And the thinker can read his emotions and manipulates him, sort of reading his mind, reading his emotions, and then after she's manipulated him, she uses a power on him, wiping his memory and placing a block, keeping him from thinking about the suspicion.
Yeah. The details in this are so good. I love this, like, we're still in her point of view, so we're seeing how she's subtly manipulating them. I like this line: the entity nodded. It feigned a moment of wariness, assuring these individuals it was merely human. And that's such a great little beat there. It feigned a moment of wariness. And like the coolest part about this, of course, is that, just like you said, we see this is the optimal version of the world as far as these entities go, and it's still a shit show for the humans. There's two sides locked in a war. There's super weapons, which I'm guessing presumably are endbringers of some sort, are being employed in numbers far greater than they were in our story we've seen. It's death and destruction, and it's hard to believe there's a world in which our characters have less of a chance of winning than the one we're currently in. But the fact that Fuckster can just literally, like, delete someone's memory anytime she detects that they're getting close to finding out what's going on paints a picture where they're just screwed. Like, there's nothing they can do. The cycle's going to end. Everyone's going to die. Like, it's crazy that our story of Worm is the optimal one for the humans after everything they've gone through.
Yeah, because as bad as Sion is, like, imagine if he were a cold, calculating, charming psychopath.
Yeah, imagine if you were smart.
Yeah, right.
You're stupid, Sion.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, it is kind of chilling watching how, I mean, she isn't human, but she's in this human body, and she may even have human emotions, kind of the way Sion does. So it is chilling watching how coldly she manipulates these people and, you know, arranges their deaths and suffering, basically.
Yeah, effortlessly too. Like the block, like she's able to block things out of their mind. Like, we learn that the entire conflict that's going on here is mandated by her. This is not just natural conflict arising because people have superpowers. This is, she's literally putting blocks in people's minds so that the two sides will never be able to come to an agreement on anything.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
it's crazy.
So yeah, she finishes the simulation, and is pretty happy with it. And at the last moment, she replaces her own ability to see the future with that of the third entity, and loses sight of that future that she had just chosen, and then crashes into Earth, unprepared, too hard, and things are going wrong.
Matt, what did Danny always say about altering your shards while driving? No, this was actually something you did not point this out for me, but you gave me the little tiniest bit of thread that I pulled the shit out of. And this is a really fun beat that Sion loses their loved one because they weren't paying enough attention to the present. They were distracted and thinking about something else and crashed and died, which is the same fucking thing that happens to Taylor. That's so wonderful, and it connects those two characters at a fundamental level in this moment where they're going to be directly going against each other. And that's such a clever idea, and it's never explicitly stated in the text. This is just something that is there if you want to find it, and it might not have been even explicitly intended by Wildbow, but it feels like it is.
I think a lot of the parallels are certainly because what you were saying is and what's cool, we were talking way earlier, and you were saying, like, what's cool is that this is all, even Sion is someone who has lost someone, and he's reacting to that loss and to the trauma of that loss.
Right.
And then all I said, I was trying to be as non-leading as possible. I just said, and think about how he lost that loved one. Yeah. And then you got it, which is,
I went there.
And that's the popular fan interpretation that the thinker entity was texting while driving. And it's I feel like that's a parallel that's definitely there to be found.
Yeah, I mean, like, even if it's not as explicit that correlation, there is definitely a correlation between the two of them have lost someone important to them, and that trauma drives their actions going forward. And that is absolutely something that we see in our main character. And the fact that, once again, like, when you're setting up a conflict between an antagonist and a protagonist, if you have their main central issue be something that is parallel to each other, then that conflict doesn't feel as manufactured. It doesn't feel as contrived. It just feels like two people set on a path that they're going because their needs happen to intersect with each other. A natural conflict will happen. And because those needs are driven by a similar thing, it helps that conflict attach itself to the themes of your novel, because then you get both sides looking at that central theme of trauma and how we live and survive with the terrible things that happen to us and what they do to us. And suddenly we see that from two different sides in our final end of the book conflict. And that's so great. It's so smart.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Well said. So now we see that, as we've seen many times before, we thought this was from one person's point of view, but it's sort of from someone else's point of view, because now the young girl Fortuna wakes up having experienced all of this as a trigger vision. This girl is living in some kind of low-tech settlement on another Earth. People have been turning into monsters in the area recently, and she realizes on some level the importance of what she's just seen. She sees how to keep it. She kind of gets how to keep the memory if she follows some simple steps. So she follows the steps, drugging herself and falling asleep. Yeah,
this is a really great shift. And I know we'll probably get into this as we go, but I love, once again, the detail of seeing someone's power and how that power manifests itself internally from their perspective. I remember the first time we talked about this is when we got to see what Trickster's teleport power looked like back in Arc 17, where he felt the surfaces and could see the links between the surfaces that he was about to teleport. That was really cool. And I think this is another example of that, how she just thinks something and then all of a sudden the number of steps appear, and then she can look at each of the items on that list of steps. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool because it's that future sight, but it is still really powerful, obviously, but it's truncated in a way that allows her to conceptualize it and use it.
Right.
Yeah. So she wakes up again later, having retained the memory of the trigger event, and she understands the threat that she's facing. So she begins to ask her new power how she can stop this entity that she's seen. And she asks herself, can she have everything? Can she save everyone from the godling and still keep her uncle with her? And the answer is no. There's no path to that victory.
Yeah, and this is such an important detail, isn't it? And this goes back to what we were talking about before, the truth of Cauldron and the truth of this power. Having this power does not make the impossible possible. And this explains Cauldron, explains their actions. Not only does it explain why they can't just win automatically, it also explains why we kind of see them dehumanize themselves. Because when you set up, I want to build an army, okay, 3,500 steps, the torture and murder and killing of thousands of people doesn't become a thing. It just becomes step 453 instead of what you're actually doing. And that is dehumanizing.
Yeah. And you can't just be like, well, I want to do the plan, except not that step.
Right.
It's like, no, that was the path.
Right. And it removes humanity. And what the other thing it does is removes choice, because you're not actually, you have removed your own agency. It's so funny that the thing that Cauldron does is take choice away from people, make choice for people. You were about to die. I saved you to turn you into this monster. I took that choice to die away from you. But Contessa's power takes choice away from her too, because she says, I want to do this. Here's your list of things to do. You don't get to choose which you do. If you want X, you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't have a choice anymore. And I love the detail of that and how that ties into everything we've been talking about with Cauldron as a whole.
Yeah, it absolutely takes the choice away from her. And you can totally imagine, like, if you always knew what the right choice was in any moment, then you would have no excuse not to just do that. Like, if you did anything other than that, then you're like, oh, I'm hurting myself for no reason.
Yeah, like, imagine like just getting up in the morning. It's like, can I snooze for 15 more minutes? No.
No. Yeah.
No.
Right.
Well, we'll have, how do I get to work on time? Well, you wake up now, and like all that fun, like that day-to-day, like tiny choices that we don't even think about are removed from you. You really are just like a slave to your own existence at that point.
Yeah, and that's the other part of her power is not only does she see the paths, but her body unerringly executes them.
Right.
If she kind of chooses to go with it. So
yeah.
So she does become aware of a fog that creeps in when she considers certain questions. She tells her uncle how to save himself, and then she flees. She makes her way up a cliffside and finds a number of people confused, all from other worlds. A dark-skinned woman tries to talk to her, but Fortuna evades her.
Yeah, it's you kind of see now why Dr. Mother named herself that, because she finds this little girl, and the first thing she does is approach her and try to talk to her and presumably help her, because she just sees this little girl running around panicked.
Yeah, I think it's really great that we get this aspect of this interlude where we see Dr. Mother be a really decent person and really try to do the right thing. And because without this, I mean, we saw her justify herself a bit in the previous chapters we just read, but this makes us see like, yeah, she really started out and she was trying to do her best.
Yeah.
And
and I think like that's we've done that throughout this book, right? We launch into these interludes and we learn the background of characters, and we begin to understand them, and therefore develop a certain amount of pity for them. And it doesn't erase the things they've done. The things they've done have still horrible, but you understand them a little more. We understood why Emma did what Emma did, even if we still don't like her as a person. And I think that's the same thing here with Dr. Mother and Contessa. We get them now.
Yeah. So here she arrives at the forest of the godling's flesh. So I just want to pause for a small moment and point out, like I've said before, in fact, I said in my review of Worm that I wrote years ago, that one thing that I love about Worm is that it's science fiction. It's really good science fiction. It's not just, just a superhero story. It's a well done science fiction tale that happens to construct the genre of superhero via science fiction means. But this interlude, I love how close it is to fantasy, because we have these images of like this little girl fleeing through the dark forest where there's monsters, there's the dead bodies of monsters. She climbs up this cliff and goes into this fairy tale forest of body parts, sighing, rustling body parts, and she keeps using this term, the godling, which is such a evocative kind of fantasy-ish term that no one in our main story would really use regularly, but she does, because she's from this very it seems like she's from a very undeveloped world that looks much more like the fantasy genre, and I just find that very charming.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It is otherworldly and very different, but still feels like it belongs in this book.
Yeah. So when she tries to kill the creature, though, the fog descends again, and she can't see the path to do it because there's a block in place. But the dark-skinned woman helps her, and they're able to communicate using Fortuna's power, and together they stab the creature at the base of the skull.
Teamwork! So I guess ultimately we have to guess that the reason they were able to do this was that in Fuckster's transformation into the fake human she was going to be, there was a moment of weakness here or something that they were able to exploit. So it's not something that could be just easily immediately replicated in Sion. But I do like the idea that it seems like what they did is cut off the draw to the well. That there's this well of this entity, and by stabbing it where they did, they almost severed the line between the thing that was being created and the source of that power. And that seems like something, hey, we could maybe replicate that in Sion. Like if there's a well, there's got to be a bucket with a string that's going down to it, and if we cut that out, maybe that's game over. So again, we're getting little clues, I think, throughout this.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I like how it's not clearly said like, oh, this is exactly what the entity did wrong. But I mean, we definitely saw Sion had no apparent point of vulnerability like this,
right?
Because he didn't make a mistake and crash land basically, and
right.
leave his well open to access from humans, which is what the thinker did.
Yeah, way to go, Fuckster.
Yeah. So later, Fortuna and the Doctor discuss approaches for combating the other entity, which Fortuna knows is still out there somewhere from the vision.
Yeah, and the thing that I wanted to pull out this section that really jumped out at me to continue our talk about the blessing and the curse that is Contessa's power is this line where she says, "The indecision gripped her again. When she wasn't acting in the scope of her power, it was all the more difficult to act." And that, I think, is just a natural drawback of what this power creates. If everything you want to do, you know the best way to do it, suddenly when that is removed from you, like, you're so not used to having to make those choices without knowing the consequences, suddenly you can't act. And that's a real big drawback, that, like, the idea that, like, you freeze because suddenly you don't know. Like, you have to, for a second, be just a normal human again, and it means you kind of slowly become completely reliant on your power or other people.
Yeah, right. I've had this thought about thinker powers before. Like, we've seen inside Accord's head, we've seen inside Tattletale's head, where their whole psychology becomes wrapped up in their thinker power, because it's so ridiculously strong that it just takes over the function of a large amount of what would normally be your own human cognition.
Yeah.
So they try out a formula that they've derived from the flesh of the garden on a man named Lamar, and he dies horribly.
Well, that didn't work. Sorry, Lamar.
Yeah.
Our bad.
Yeah. And she says, Don't call me by the name my parents gave me. The Doctor took a moment to reply. Another name? Contessa nodded.
So this is perfect. It comes at a time where she's literally transforming herself because she doesn't want to be that other person, because she's turning into this other person, a person that can do this thing, a person that can casually kill Lamar and just move on with their lives. And I just love structurally how it's executed, though. Like, it would be very easy to just say, like, call me Contessa, but just, like, another name, we don't even see her answer. It just, we see that shift to that new identity just through the nod. Like, it's just so simple and yet elegant that we make this transition.
Yeah, I also like that we find out Lamar's name, not because, it matters and we never hear about Lamar again. It's because at this point, Contessa actually bothered knowing the names of the people who she was doing this to.
Right.
This is the first patient. She finds out the name. Maybe she has some hope for this. Doesn't work. The guy dies horribly. And then in the next batch, there's no names.
Yeah, it's the blonde-haired kid, the one that looked like the monster, the little boy, the girl. Yeah. You're absolutely right. That is a big shift. You're right.
Yeah. So later they see on TV that the Golden Man has arrived, and Contessa knows, of course, who this is. She admits that it's easier dealing with the blind spots in her power when somebody else takes point. And this is how the Doctor comes to be the leader, I think. And between the two of them, they decide to build an army.
Yeah, and that's the Cauldron reveal, that they didn't really know what they were doing.
Yep.
Like, they're just trying things. They don't know any more than anyone else. They're just trying things, and maybe they'll work and maybe they won't. And like, it's like you hear someone has a path to victory and you're like, oh, well, shit. But because of the block, because that she can't see or work around Sion, that their plan has never been the 3,000 step process to save the world. It's just been the 3,000 step process to maybe have success.
Yeah. To have these resources at hand,
right?
And these resources may or may not be enough to save the world.
Yep.
It reminds me a bit of Sion. Basically, presumably asking for a path to find his partner and finding his partner dead.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, you malformed your wish, and the capricious genie of your future state gave you not quite what you asked for.
Damn monkey's paw.
Yeah. No. So they prepare another batch of 10 vials, and this time 6 survive the process. We have the blonde man who can invent, which I don't care that you don't look at tag, Scott. I'm going to say that this is Hero.
Yeah,
I think cool.
I guessed that because they said he was one of the earliest ones, I thought.
Yeah, I think so. And Doormaker too is also in this this batch.
Yeah.
And we have the blonde man saying, ironic because he is hero, say, "You're heroes as far as I'm concerned." And then the immediate next thing after like just a break is monsters. The word was howled, reverberating through the building. And here we have this heroes monsters theme thing going on again.
Yeah, that juxtaposition though is just perfect. And like you said, there's a scene break between it, so we get to see this little square between a high point in Cauldron's existence where they just had success for the first time, and someone calls them a hero, and then bam, we're right back to the fall of Cauldron. Heroes to monsters.
Yep. So Contessa, this is of course roughly present day, or it's showing how things got to where they are. Contessa flees, hemmed in by the perception blocking fog.
Yeah, damn you, Mantellum.
Yep. She runs and she thinks about how everything has gone wrong.
Yeah, and I like this because it's easy to read this fog as just fog, like it's just a literal reflection of Mantellum's power blocking effect. But I think if you look at this more metaphorically, you see that Cauldron's in a place now where, for the first time in a long time, they're lost. They don't know what to do next. So it's the fog that is being caused by Mantellum here represents Contessa's literal sense of loss right now, and she doesn't know what to do. She's lost for the first time. She just like everyone we were talking about doesn't have a role anymore. She doesn't know what her purpose is. She doesn't know what to do anymore, and all their plans are falling apart, and then she's literally being chased by the fog of uncertainty. And I think that's very, very wonderfully poetic while still working in just the narrative function.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I like, you've kind of drawn my attention to the fact that, like, she's running almost as if, like, if the fog catches her, she's dead. But all the fog is she can't use her power, which,
right.
Yeah, she's way, way, way weaker without her power. But she's so desperate to avoid it. I mean, I'm not saying she's wrong to be desperate to avoid it. I'm just saying, it's visceral at this point.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, she's reflecting on everything that Cauldron has lost, and she thinks they had 5 major tools left to deploy. 3 armies, 2 of which were roughly the same size as any of the defending forces. Kansu, who was the stalling measure, and a Hail Mary in the form of the 3 vials with the special element inside.
Uh-oh. Hey, those 3 vials, they're not there anymore.
Yep.
That's not a great Hail Mary.
Yeah. So she decides to call the Number Man. Weld corners her, and she fights him off while talking to Number Man. She tells him how to reach the doctor, and he points out to her the existence of his conveniently foreshadowed portal window.
That was like a million arcs ago, Wildbow. Damn it.
Yeah,
How did she set that up so long ago?
I know, it's the kind of detail that you wouldn't forget, though. Like,
yeah,
just this little character detail from Number Man that he has this window. I also like to imagine that as she's fighting Weld, she's just like has a perfectly level voice talking to the Number Man.
Yeah.
So she evades Weld and the teleporter irregular and gets through the window into an alien Earth. Once through the doorway, her power seems to kick in again. The cape shoots magma down at her, and she uses a stick to sell her own death. After the capes leave, the doorway closes behind her, and she's stuck there for about an hour until the doorway opens again, presumably after Taylor and crew have rescued and healed Doormaker. She uses her power to check on the state of things and finds that the doctor is dead, the vials are gone, and then she runs into a group of quote-unquote protectorate capes, which her power tells her is actually Teacher and his minions.
Yeah, and I really like this moment with Teacher. I think it kind of ties into what we were talking about with her before, but particularly I like when she realizes that the doctor is dead, she says, odd that she couldn't bring herself to feel bad about it. What is it? Was it because she spent so long trying to achieve something and she failed? Or was it because she'd lost respect for the doctor, like she'd lost respect for herself? And that, I think, ties into that idea that they've lost humanity. In doing what they've done, they've stripped themselves of their humanity, and now she doesn't feel much of anything anymore except she's lost and needs purpose. And here's Teacher to give her one.
Yeah, they've both been tools of Contessa's power this whole time.
Yeah.
And sadly, she doesn't take the lesson to say, hey, maybe I should try not to rely on this and think for myself. She just says, okay, all right, whatever, you're in charge now.
Right.
And so he asks for her help, and she says, okay, what are we doing? And he says, saving us from ourselves. He said, case in point, we've got a crisis that involves one little lady I think you're familiar with. He held up his phone. A picture was displayed. It took her a moment to recognize the person in the picture, and not because it was an unfamiliar face. Weaver, she asked.
Oh, what a way to end this arc. Like you said, there's something with Contessa's character here. She's so used to being the number two in an organization that taking point on something is not something she can handle. So the first time someone comes up to her and offers her a slot as number two in their organization, she jumps on it. She's like, yep, I needed meaning, I needed purpose, and you offered it for me, so boom, I'm going to do it. Which a person that she probably knows is extremely untrustworthy and manipulative, and like teacher is not a good person and is not someone that you want to be around for any period of time, but needs to have that purpose, so she does it.
You reminded me, we don't know how old Contessa was when she got her power, but it must have been pretty young. Must have been, pretty young. So I think she probably has that breadth and depth thing going on where her power has sort of dominated her, actually, and that's why she's so able to just submit to whatever the answer appears to be in her environment.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the second thing I want to talk about before we wrap up here is the way the picture of Weaver is described. So like, at this point we have to assume that we've jumped into the future a little bit here, because we know there was an hour that went by. We know that Contessa got out after the doorway opened back up. There's this idea that like it took her a moment to recognize the person in the picture, and not because it was an unfamiliar face. So what does Taylor have to look like now in this picture for that to be that? And it's just like, we're really setting the stage for what the hell is going to happen to this girl in the next arc. And it's so great. I can't wait. It's like I said, it's tragic. It's heartbreaking, but it's very exciting as well.
Yes, I also can't wait. And yes, it is tragic and heartbreaking and exciting. So that wraps up arc 29.
Arc 29.
Then I'm leaving only arc 30 and the epilogue.
But like epilogues are epilogues. There's one more arc and then there's an epilogue.
Yeah. Well, the epilogue is still like 5 or 6 chapters, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's like the story ends. That's like epilogue is after a story. So the story is going to end next week, and then we will see what happens after that.
Yeah. All right. I think there's some good name game material. I've wanted to talk about Satirical actually ever since he was introduced, because he has kind of this Satyr, goat man theme, but it's really like satirical as in satire, as in he makes copies and then the copies look like other people, as in a satire of the other people. So I always thought that was
one of those double meanings.
Yeah. Fortuna got basically lucky.
Yeah.
And she is kind of the, not that Cauldron, actually won, but she did get the power of being really lucky and being able to win, basically.
Yeah.
Dr. Mother, we kind of have hit on a few times, I think, but I don't think we've ever really done a name game where we talk about the fact that it usually is shortened to the doctor or something like that, because she is a doctor and so forth, but she's also has this matronly side where she's trying to she's sort of caring for Contessa. She's also sort of trying to be the one who cares for the whole world, but she does this at the cost of her humanity, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And we already talked about all the capes in the future site, so I don't think we need to talk about that again. But
no,
that was fun.
That was good. Yeah. All
right, so let's talk about those speculations, Scott.
All right, let's close up some of the old ones. We got quite a few this time. I said that Taylor had already had her second trigger event almost immediately after the first, possibly while still locked in the locker. We can call that correct. Man seems to know what he's talking about. I don't know if the story specifically confirms that, but I think that's the most confirmation we're going to get.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I also said that Dr. Mother discovered the corpse of the warrior's counterpart, Fluxter, and crafted the vials based on its shards. That's kind of how it happened. I mean, discovered the corpse. She she made the corpse.
So,
but
she found the counterpart. It wasn't dead yet. Yes.
Yeah. So it's half credit.
No, I mean, I think that's
okay.
Yeah. I think that counts.
And then I said Contessa. I thought that Contessa was the third entity that we saw bumping into Fuckster, which is wrong. Now, but the shard she had, is that a shard from the third entity, or is that her own? Is that Fuckster's own future seeing shard? That I wasn't quite clear on that.
I always forget the detail of what's going on here. I think that it may be the foreign, the third entity shard, and I think when Sion sees the Numberman and Contessa, he kind of remarks on her shard as being weird in some way, and the details are escaping me now.
No, I think that's that. So I was not right in that, but it was close. It's close.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's related. Yeah.
Yeah. And then my final one is, it was Sion. Sion was the he's going to blow up Cauldron space. That was correct, because that was the gimme speculation. I just did that one to give me a win in the win column. All right. So that's the old ones. And you know what, guys, like I was thinking about this for a long time, and we're here at the end now. We're on the last arc. And I think for once, I really don't want to speculate specifically. I don't want to make specific guesses anymore. I think I've made it pretty clear throughout the last few arcs what I think is going to happen at the end of this. And I think I believe some of the specific speculations I made tie into pretty much literally what I think is going to happen. So you can look at those and tell. But I think in this final arc, I think I just want to kind of sit back and enjoy it unfold in front of me. And we're going to come back next week and we're going to talk all about it in detail. But I just don't want to make any specific speculations. I just want to enjoy it as it comes to me. So this episode and this episode only, I'm not going to make anything. I'm not going to do it. So I know some of you probably be upset. You want to know what I thought was going to happen, but I don't know, Matt. I think I've made that pretty clear what I think is going down.
Yeah, and I think, I don't blame you at all, because if there's a point in a story when you want to just organically experience the story, it would be right as you're sliding into the climactic ending of everything.
Yeah,
because I mean, nobody gets to that point in a book they're really enjoying and like closes the book and thinks, all right, let me analyze this and think what's going to happen. What you do is you say, all right, I can't wait to see what happens next, and you turn the page. So yeah. Don't blame me at all. Yeah. So that will wrap up our coverage of Arc 29 Venom. I hope everyone enjoyed our discussion and hearing Scott's reactions. As always, we appreciate your feedback, and we're always trying to improve. So let us know if you have any advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's episode.
Yeah, you can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or on Twitter at gotwormpod. My Arc 30 live read will begin this Thursday, the 7th? Yeah, the 7th. I usually start at noon. I think this is kind of a long arc, so in order to make sure I can finish it all in one day and not have to do that thing where I halfway through one of the chapters have to just be like, sorry guys, I gotta go. I think I'm going to start that a little early on Thursday. So I think I'm going to start that 10 o'clock Central Time, just to get a jump on it, so I can make sure I finish it on Thursday. So if you haven't followed along on Twitter yet, and I have a great time with that. I love to see y'all's reactions to my reaction. So it's never a better time than right now to follow us on Twitter and see me read that final arc.
Oh yes, I definitely enjoy following those. That's and God, I will die if you stop reading that arc halfway
well, that's
through.
why I'm giving myself a whole 2 extra hours there, Matt. So
all right, sounds good. So yeah, if you're not already subscribed to We've Got Worm, it would be really shocking that you're listening to this episode, but we strongly recommend that you go ahead and subscribe and never miss another episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
Yeah, and as always, you can find this, all the other podcasts we do, and all of our writing, essays, film, and TV criticism, and more at dailyplanetfilms.com. Over on the other podcasting feed this week, Michael and I got together to talk about Godless, the newest show from Netflix, a reimagining of the Western. And we compared that back to some classic Westerns in Shane and The Searchers. And it was a pretty good episode, so check it out. And check out Godless on Netflix. I love that show, so it's awesome. Check that out and all the other podcasts we do.
Yeah, it was a very, very interesting episode. And yeah, if you like any of our other shows and want to support them, we have a Patreon page, patreon.com/DailyPlanetFilms. Consider donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Special thanks to new Planeteers Sick Martin, Racemon, Misha, and Jake at the $1 level, and Captain's Planet Z-Man, who upgraded to the $10 level. I will remind everyone that it only takes $1 to get access to the Discord, which is a hop in place. We really like the conversations going on in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of Patreon in general, don't forget to stop by Wildow's page and toss some money there, because he's the guy that makes this whole thing possible.
And as always, if you can't afford to pledge right now, that's okay. You can still help us out by harshly flinging chunks of people's dead loved ones at them, screaming, listen to We've Got Worm. Or you could just, man, I wrote that, and then it's kind of mean when you read it out loud. It's kind of taken out of context. That's what the fuck?
Yeah.
Or you can head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. This week's Spotlight review comes from Eonol, who gives us 5 stars and says, came across We've Got Worm via a web search that I made in hopes of discovering a podcast dedicated to my favorite story. I couldn't be more pleased by the approach. It's everything I had hoped for. Matt and Scott are insightful, entertaining, and as thorough as can be reasonably expected. Even after reading Worm 3 times, experiencing Taylor's tale vicariously through Scott's first read is always a pleasure. Keep it up, guys, and looking forward to We've Got Ward. Thanks so much. And Matt, look, search engine optimization, it works. It works.
Yeah. And I always say, be the podcast you want to see in the world.
Yeah, but seriously, thank you so much for those kind words, and thank you everyone else. We got a big influx of reviews coming in, so we're a little behind. I think we're going to have to start doubling up on them because we're running out of episodes in this podcast, Matt. But so we'll be reading a bunch next week probably. But keep them coming. Thank you so much. It really does help us. It means the world to us that you guys are liking this, and I love getting to read what you guys think. It's great.
Yeah, definitely. All right, that's it for us this week. Next week we'll be covering Arc 30 Spec, the final arc, excluding the epilogue. Scott, what's going to happen with this one?
Well, Matt, there's going to be specks of Sion all over the place. Like I said, I don't want to really speculate too much, but you know what it's going to be, Matt? It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a super long episode of this podcast. It's probably going to be our longest episode. We are not going to stop talking or short shrift anything for the sake of time. It's going to be great. I can't wait.
Yeah. And we'll see next week on another exciting episode of We've Got Worm.